Following a brief talk with Byron and euphemistically refusing their invitation for a meal, Mag departed Carlow Church with Amy's little hand in his. At this point, it was already past lunchtime. "Father, I'm hungry. Shouldn't we go eat something?" Amy asked as she looked up at Mag, and even though she was asking him whether they should go and eat, her expectant expression was asking what are we going to eat, instead. Mag nodded with a smile, and said, "All right, let's have some good food. Last time, we didn't get a chance to explore Renhe Food Street, let's do that now." Byron was preparing to have lunch nearby, but this was Mag's final day at Rodu, so he wanted to explore the food street to truly taste what the peak standard of cooking was like in this world. That way, he'd be able to focus and concentrate on cooking even more delicious cuisine. Amy had already withdrawn her little golden wings. After a short period of acclimatization, they already felt like a part of her body. Even though they had helped Byron and the revolutionaries win the debate against the conservatives today, the biggest reward they'd reaped from their trip to the church was actually Amy's wings. Even though Mag didn't really understand the concept of this god that the Pope had spoken about, the undeniable truth was that the ray of golden light shining down from the heavens really had bestowed the ability to fly upon Amy. This was a pair of wings that didn't require the expenditure of magical power to maintain, and they were undoubtedly going to assist her greatly in future battles. At critical moments, they could even save her from what would otherwise be sticky situations. System, does God truly exist in this world? Mag asked internally. This question is not something that the system can answer. If you really want to know the answer, perhaps you can look at yourself as reference and make a decision based on that, the system replied in a serious voice. Myself. Mag's brows furrowed. The fact that he had been able to transmigrate into this world was a phenomenon that could not be explained by science. According to the system, God had drawn his soul into this world, and deployed the system to his side in order to regulate his actions and prompt him into engaging in certain endeavors. Was the God that the Pope had spoken about the same being? Mag felt as if he was onto something, but he then quickly shook his head. Concepts like God were far too distant to him. Those were beings that transcended this world and existed on a higher plane. All he wanted to do now was to survive in this world and be a part of Amy's life as she grew up. Mag looked back at the grand church before getting onto the horse-drawn carriage from the second prince's manor, which had been waiting for them well in advance, with Amy. Following an instruction from Mag, the coach driver spurred on the horses, and they travelled toward Renhe Food Street. Renhe Food Street was the most renowned food street in Rodu. All of the restaurants on this street had to have at least a couple of attractive signature dishes. Otherwise, it was quite difficult to run a restaurant on this food street when the rent for the storefronts here was so expensive. These restaurants attracted patronage from nobles, while the roadside vendors sold food that was affordable even for commoners. As such, the food street catered for all demographics, and it was never lacking in customers. The cooking contest between Mag and the head chef of Carey's rotisserie resulted in all of the discriminatory signs on the restaurant being torn away, thereby forcing them to treat all customers as equals. It was exactly because of this that the rich merchants who weren't nobles were no longer barred from dining at these restaurants. As such, long lines had gathered outside these restaurants, and most of those customers were the aforementioned merchants who were dressed in lavish robes. The nobles who frequented those restaurants in the past all shook their heads at the long lines of merchants gathered outside, and all of them shook their heads as they got onto their horse-drawn carriages again, instructing their coach drivers to take them to other restaurants. Carey's rotisserie had also torn away their discriminatory sign, but their business was noticeably suffering. The restaurant wasn't filled to the brim with customers as it normally was, and it was quite clear that losing its head chef had dealt the rotisserie a heavy blow. As for Sinclair's roast meat stand, it was still positioned outside the rotisserie. However, there wasn't a single piece of beef on the roasting rack, and the heavily bearded Sinclair was lying back on his chair, basking in the warm autumn sun. At the same time, he was looking at Carey's rotisserie with a relaxed expression, as well as answering the inquiries of customers who came by from time to ask about the sign on his cart. The handwritten sign that Mag had plastered to the cart was still there, but a new handwritten sign had been plastered next to it. That sign read, "Mamie Restaurant's temporary Rodeo stand is indefinitely closed, and we will be unable to supply delicious beef cube until further notice. I wonder if Boss Mag is going to come back. Is he just going to give up on such a lucrative business? But then again, with his cooking skills, he'd earn a lot of money anywhere. So be it, I'll look after this stand for him for 3 more days. If he doesn't come in 3 days, then I'll have to find something else to do. After all, I still have to pay for my kid to go to school," Sinclair murmured to himself. Right at this moment, 2 humanoid figures, one tall and one short, blocked the sunlight that Sinclair was basking in. "Boss Sinclair." Sinclair looked at the duo through narrowed eyes, and he faltered slightly before jumping up from his chair with an elated expression. "Boss Mag. Little Amy. What brings you here?" "We're here to have some lunch, and I saw you as I was passing through, so I decided to come and greet you," Mag replied with a smile. He had seen the signs plastered to the cart, and also heard Sinclair's errant monologue. Despite his rough external appearance, this heavily bearded man was quite thoughtful. "Uncle Big Beard, why aren't you making roast beef?" Amy asked with a puzzled look. Sinclair scratched his head in an awkward manner, and said, "After tasting the roast meat made by Boss Mag, I'm ashamed to call my cooking roast beef. Most of the customers who visit my stand now are here for Boss Mag's cooking, so I can't just disappoint them with my shoddy cooking." Looks like you know our place, after all." Amy nodded in approval. Sinclair's expression stiffened upon hearing this. Even though she was right, her words still stung. However, he simply couldn't bring himself to get mad at Amy's adorable little face. Amy then continued, "But why don't you learn from father, then? If you learn to cook delicious roast beef as well, then you can keep running this stand." "Well," Sinclair turned to Mag before shaking his head with a smile, and said, "I can't do that. A chef's recipes are their most important possession." Mag tore off the signs on the cart as he smiled, and said, "If you want to learn, I wouldn't mind teaching you a few tricks. However, I think it's best that you run this stand using the original name." 802 And he has an adorable daughter. After exploring the entire food street in one afternoon, Mag and Amy both got onto the horse-drawn carriage with content expressions and bulging stomachs. Mag had given Sinclair a handwritten recipe of his roast beef. During lunchtime, Sinclair had cooked a batch of roast beef according to that recipe, and Mag had been present alongside him to give him some instructions. From here onward, Sinclair's talent and hard work would decide how much business his roast beef attracted. As for his decision to ask Sinclair to reinstate the name of the restaurant, the reasoning behind that was quite simple. Sinclair was indeed a very interesting person, but Mag had already done him a great kindness by giving him a complete recipe of his roast beef. There was no need to allow him to further improve his business by using Mamie Restaurant's name. If Sinclair's roast beef kebabs were of a satisfactory standard to him the next time he came to Rodu, he could perhaps consider making his stand a branch of Mamie Restaurant. When the horse-drawn carriage passed by Carey's rotisseries, Sinclair's cart was already gone. As for the rotisserie, it remained to be seen how long it would take to recover from this slump. Perhaps the restaurant would be forced into a further decline by Sinclair's brand new roast meat stand. The atmosphere in the Second Prince's manor was still quite tense and gloomy. The horse-drawn carriage entered the manor through the side door, and Mag had only just disembarked when the butler rushed over to him with a slightly forced smile on his face. "You're finally back, Master Mag. His Highness is still waiting for you to cook him dinner." "His Highness still hasn't had dinner yet." Mag swore internally. He had intentionally returned after dinner time. Night had already settled over the entire city, but who would have thought that Josh would still be waiting for him to cook dinner? Indeed. His Highness specifically told us that he would only eat your cooking tonight, but you didn't come back this entire time. I was just about to go out and find you." The butler nodded with a hint of blame in his voice as he took the souvenirs that Mag had bought from him. As he did so, he urged, "Master Mag, I'll hold on to these for you. Let's go to the kitchen now." "Sure." Mag nodded in response. It was his final night here, so he had to leave Josh with a lasting impression of him. "Oh, by the way, Master Mag, His Highness says that he doesn't want the spicy grilled fish tonight, the other dishes will suffice," the butler suddenly added. "That's a real pity." A genuinely forlorn expression appeared on Mag's face. Mag prepared a braised chicken and rice and a black pepper steak for Josh, and then gestured for the female servant nearby to bring it out on a platter. He then untied his apron, and was just about to return to his room when the butler from before hurried over to Mag again. "Master Mag, His Highness would like to see you. Please come with me." Mag's expression stiffened ever so slightly upon hearing this, but he quickly nodded, and said, "Sure." After following the butler into the grand dining hall near the kitchen, Mag discovered that Josh was currently dining on his steak. Even though it had only been a day since Mag had last seen him, Josh seemed to have aged many years. His features were slightly pale, and there was messy stubble on his face. His hair was a complete mess, and the dark rings around his eyes suggested that he had yet to sleep following the incident on the 5th Street. If one were to look closely, they would be able to see a faint scar on his throat that hadn't been there the day before. If it weren't for the lavish robes that he was wearing, Josh would look no different from a homeless drunkard living under a bridge. Even as he ate his steak, he was doing so in a completely unrefined way with terrible table manners, just as if he were a caveman. Josh put down his knife and fork upon hearing the sound of footsteps outside. He looked up at Mag, and his eyes glazed over slightly. For some reason, the image of the black claymore slashing toward him resurfaced in his mind, and his hand tightened around the knife in his grasp. However, his grip relaxed again at the sight of the smile on Mag's face. Josh looked at Mag, and nodded as he said, "Master Mag, you won the Best Dish Award during the royal banquet yesterday, so it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you're the best chef in the world. However, are you really unwilling to stay in Rodu? Even if you don't want to cook at my manor, I can grant you almost any plot of land in Rodu for you to open a restaurant twice as large as the one you have in Chaos City." Mag shook his head, and replied, "Thank you for your kind offer, but I refused His Majesty's kindness yesterday, and I must also do the same again here." Josh looked into the Mag's eyes for a while, and only withdrew his gaze with a smile after a brief silence. "So be it. Even Father couldn't convince you to stay, so I certainly won't do any better in that regard. It's just a pity that I won't be able to taste such delicious steak again in the future. My offer here stands indefinitely. If you ever want to come to Rodu, contact me, and I'll sort out everything for you." "Thank you, Your Highness." Mag nodded with a smile in response. His expression remained unchanged throughout. "You're going back to Chaos City tomorrow, so you should go and get some rest." Josh picked up his knife and fork again, and continued to dine on his steak. "I'll be taking my leave, then." Mag cupped his fist in a salute, and then departed after shooting a surreptitious glance at the curtain beside him. Not long after Mag had departed, two black figures quickly strode in through the door. One of the black-robed figures half knelt onto the ground, and reported in a respectful voice, "Your Highness, we found nothing suspicious in Mag's room, nor did we find the Tiandu sword. Your Highness, according to reliable sources, we've already verified Mag's true identity. His real name is Noya Gould. The Gould family was once a small noble family as one of their forefathers had been a chef for a former king, but they gradually fell from grace, and by the time they reached Noya Gould's generation, their family had already lost their dukeship. 5 years ago, they struck up a vendetta against Timothy of the Barclay family over an elf, and his entire family was killed as a result, but he managed to escape from Rodu with that elf. Apparently, that elf was pregnant at the time, and judging from the time period that these events occurred in, the child should be around the same age was Mag's daughter. It's most likely the case that he forged this new identity for himself to avoid his enemies. The black-robed man delivered the report in a brisk tone. Is this information accurate? Josh's brows furrowed as he recalled that Claymore strike from the night before once again. It matches the information we received back from Chaos City, so there's a very good chance that it's accurate, the black-robed man replied. Timothy of the Barclay family, eh? He is indeed a smart man. Even after arriving at the royal palace, he knew that he was still no match for Timothy, so he decided to run away again. A cold smile appeared on Josh's face. The black-robed man asked, Your Highness, seeing as we were able to glean his true identity, there will most likely be other people in Rodu who can do the same. Should we deploy some people to protect him? Protect him? Ha! Josh chuckled coldly as a cruel sneer appeared on his face. Take this information to young Master Timothy as quickly as possible. Tell him that the one who stole his woman away from him is still alive, and he has an adorable daughter. The black-robed man was rather perplexed by this order, but he still accepted it in a respectful manner. Josh chewed on his steak with a little more force than necessary as a dark expression appeared on his face. Why do all of you have everything I want, yet I have nothing? All of you deserve to die. After Amy fell asleep, Mag lay down on the bed, and asked internally, System, you told me about a My Little Genius phone watch that can accurately locate someone, right? Didn't you tell me to piss off when I introduced it to you? The system replied in an indignant voice. Are you selling it or not? If not, then I won't ask you about it. Of course I'm selling it. No matter where you are, I can find you with just a phone call. Following upgrades from the system, the My Little Genius phone watch is fireproof, waterproof, and resistant to extremely high pressure. It can deal with everything you throw at it, and provides accurate location services within an area of 30 kilometers. At the same time, this phone watch supports real-time communication services, but each phone can only correspond with one intelligent terminal, and those will need to be purchased separately, the system rapidly introduced as if it were a professional salesman. How much does it cost? Mag asked. Even though nothing bad had happened at the church earlier in the day, the sinking feeling in his gut when he'd realized that Amy was missing was a very unsettling sensation, so it was clearly a good idea to buy a watch with location services. Due to the real-time location service that the system must provide, the My Little Genius phone watch will cost 1 million copper coins per pair. If you also want to purchase an intelligent terminal, then that will be an extra 50,000 copper coins, amounting to a total of 1,050,000 copper coins. Deal. I'll get a purple one for Amy, Mag said without any hesitation. Ding, 1,050,000 copper coins have been successfully deducted. Ding. The My Little Genius phone watch is being produced, and can be delivered in 3 minutes. Ding. Setting up wireless communication and location services, time required will be 5 minutes. The system's joyful voice sounded. 3 minutes passed by quickly, and 2 boxes appeared on the table. Mag rose to his feet and made his way over to the table. There was one large box and one small box sitting on the table. The small box was embroidered with floral designs, while the large box was of a simple black color. Mag picked up the little box, only to find that it was very light. He opened the box to find a purple watch sitting inside. The watch had been extremely intricately crafted, and it was as dazzling as a string of cut precious gems. It looked more like a gorgeous bracelet than a phone watch. Amy should like this, right? A smile appeared on Mag's face. 1 million copper coins wasn't much to him, especially when Amy's safety was concerned, so he felt this purchase was completely justified. After opening the other box, Mag was greeted by the sight of a black pager. System, you're selling me this crap for 50,000 copper coins. Mag couldn't help but roll his eyes as he extricated this relic of the past from the box. This is the newest retro fashion trend. Carrying a pager will set you apart, and it has features such as a touch screen as well as location and communication services. It's the ideal terminal for the My Little Genius phone watch. Mag picked up the instruction manual, and quickly read through it before turning on the pager. The black and white screen was quite clear, and after setting up the network, and connecting the two devices, a small red dot really did appear on the center of the screen. There were also notifications about direction and distance. Even though Mag was unable to understand the system's fashion sense, he was quite content with the devices. As such, he placed the pager into his pocket so he could carry it with him at all times. The next morning, Mag got up and dressed Amy before packing up all of their belongings. Only then did he pull the small purple box out of his pocket with a smile on his face, and said, "Amy, I've got a present for you." "What is it?" Amy looked at the pretty purple box in Mag's hand with expectant eyes. "It's a watch that can let you speak to Father even from very far away," Mag said as he gently opened the box. "Wow! That's such a beautiful watch. And it's purple as well." Amy's large eyes practically glowed as she stared at the watch in the box. Mag pulled the watch out of the box before strapping it onto Amy's wrist. The purple strap was very thin, and the size of the watch's surface was also just right on Amy's wrist. He smiled, and asked, "Do you like it?" "I do. I love it." Amy raised her little hand up high and swung it from side to side, looking at the sunlight reflecting off the gems on the watch with an exuberant smile on her face. She then turned to Mag with curiosity in her eyes, and asked, "Father, you said that this watch can let me talk to you even from far away, right?" "I did. If you encounter any danger or you miss me, you can rotate this little button, and I'll be able to speak to you through this watch." Mag pointed at a little button on the watch as he pulled out his pager. "Like this? What do I do next?" Amy rotated the button with a curious expression, and Mag's pager immediately began to ring. Mag pressed a button on the pager to receive the call, and Amy's voice sounded from the other end. "Wow, that's amazing." Amy's mouth gaped open slightly as she looked at the terminal in Mag's hand with amazement in her eyes. "All right, we have to prepare to go home now." Mag ended the call and patted Amy's little head before carrying her out the door. Along the way, Amy was fiddling around with her new watch the entire time while asking Mag all sorts of questions about it. Mag was very pleased with the admiration in Amy's eyes, and he naturally took all of the accolades that belonged to the system. The horse-drawn carriage from the second prince's manor transported Mag and Amy, as well as his cooking utensils, out of the city. After they had arrived, Krasua and Novan just so happened to be disembarking from a nearby horse-drawn carriage as well. A massive white flying magic beast was lying down on the ground while manual laborers loaded luggage onto its back. "Master Krasu! Principal!" Amy waved her little hand at Krasua and Novan in an excited manner. "Master Krasu, Principal Novan," Mag also greeted them with a smile as he made his way over to the duo with Amy in his arms. "Little Amy." Krasua greeted Amy in response before turning to Mag as he said, "I was worried that Josh would force you to stay. But then again, the incident last night definitely gave him a massive fright, so he probably didn't have the heart to ask you to stay." Mag was naturally aware of what had taken place the night before. After all, he had almost chopped off Josh's head, and by the looks of it, he really had been severely shell-shocked. As such he smiled, and replied, "I even turned down His Majesty's offer, so he probably knew that he wouldn't be able to convince me to stay anyway." "Haha, you really are an interesting man, Boss Mag." Krasua chuckled with amusement. Novan was also looking at Mag with a smile as he said, "Mr. Mag, you've rejected the king's offer and chosen to return to Chaos City instead. On behalf of Chaos City, I'd like to express a warm welcome back. Of course I'd make this decision. After all, Chaos City is still the most interesting place, is it not?" Mag shrugged, and all three of them burst into laughter. The massive white bird spread its wings and flew toward the south. "Father, didn't that uncle who really likes roast beef say that he wanted to come to Chaos City with us?" Where is he? Amy looked around with a curious expression atop the bird's spacious back. Crab. Mag raised his eyebrows upon hearing this. If Amy hadn't reminded him, he would have completely forgotten about Duke Abraham. After the recent action-packed couple of days, Duke Abraham's proposal to go to Chaos City with him had completely slipped his mind. Mag scratched his nose in a rather awkward manner as he said, "Maybe he forgot. I didn't see him at the city gates before departure." "Boss Mag! Boss Mag! Wait for me!" Right at this moment, an urgent voice sounded from behind them. A massive black falcon drew level with the bird that Mag and the others were sitting on. Duke Abraham was standing atop the bird's back, waving his hands in a vehement manner. "My apologies, Duke Abraham. I was in a rush to board the bird just then, and forgot to wait for you." "Please forgive me," Mag said in an apologetic manner. Abraham waved his words off nonchalantly, and replied, "It's all right, I woke up too late, so it's my own fault. Also, it's about time my Xiao Hei one got some exercise." Krasil looked at the black falcon's potbelly, and pursed his lips as he said, "This is such a majestic hunting falcon, but you raised it as a pig, what a pity." Mag also cast a glance over to the black falcon. At first glance, it did indeed appear to be quite majestic and powerful. However, upon closer inspection, one would notice that beneath its glossy black feathers, it was most definitely a little bloated. It had lost the lithe and powerful figure of a hunting falcon, resembling a blown-up balloon instead. Despite its portly figure, it was flapping its wings with all its might, but the sound of its labored breathing struck one with concern that it was going to fall out of the sky at any moment. An awkward smile appeared on Abraham's face as he said, "Xiao Hei is just like me in its love for food, but it doesn't know how to exercise restraint. That's why I've taken it out for some exercise. Do you see that, ugly duckling? This bird can fly so high even though it's so fat, but you're fat and useless," Amy said with a disdainful expression as she looked down at Ugly Duckling, which had its eyes tightly shut. "Meow," Ugly Duckling gave a feeble response, but refused to open its eyes. The two massive birds flew side by side for a while, but Xiao Hei was quickly left behind, and was panting heavily as it struggled to keep itself aloft. However, there was a pilot as well as a group of guards on the falcon's back, so Mag wasn't concerned about Abraham's safety. He disclosed the address of his restaurant to Abraham before the white bird flew on ahead and completely left the falcon behind. Abraham looked on at the massive bird, which disappeared into the distance in what felt like the blink of an eye, and said in a meaningful voice, "Xiao Hei, it's time you lost some weight." Inside Mamie restaurant, everyone had woken up early. Yabimiya, who was dressed in her maid uniform, thrust a couple of rags into Babla's and Anna's hands, and then gave them a bubbly smile that was brimming with energy as she said, "Boss and Amy are coming back today, so let's clean up the restaurant before they get back." "All right. I'll wipe down the chairs," Anna replied with an obedient nod. If only big sister Aisha was here, she'd be able to take care of everything with a single spell, Babla said in a wistful voice as she wiped down the table before her with the rag in her hand. Anna, who was in the process of carefully cleaning a chair, stopped what she was doing as she turned to Yabimiya, and asked, "Uncle Mag and Amy are both coming back, when are big sister Aisha and big brother Blower coming back?" Yabimiya's smile stiffened ever so slightly, but she quickly recovered her composure as she replied, "They'll be back soon as well. Aisha says she'll be back once the restaurant opens again, so they'll definitely be returning shortly." "That's great." A smile appeared on Anna's face as she continued to wipe down her chair. "At least, I hope that's the case." Yabimiya cast a concerned glance out the window. At Carrie's forge, all of the blacksmiths were working up a storm. The red-hot chunks of metal were releasing scorching temperatures, and all of the blacksmiths were half-naked in the sweltering heat, slamming their hammers against the chunks of metal before them over and over again. However, the scorching heat and loud commotion didn't seem to affect the room beside the forge in the slightest. In that room, Cyril was lying back in a chair while a sexy young blonde massaged his shoulders. She swept her voluptuous breasts over the back of his head accidentally from time to time, and he wore a wide blissful smile on his face. A middle-aged man with a set of rather sinister facial features, who stood in front of his table, stole a glance at the young woman with a hint of lust in his eyes before turning to Cyril with a fawning smile. "Young master, I've acted according to your orders, and made sure that we were able to supply our orders for this month early so we could secure all of the payments. If we can get another batch of orders, we should be able to take some more deposits, and the blacksmiths will be able to set a new revenue record for the forge. In that case, we'll definitely have earned more than Blue Suede Textiles shop for the month." "Very good." Cyril opened his eyes before latching onto the young woman's hand as he said, "If we win this time, she's yours, Carrie. However, as a safety precaution, I want you to secure as many orders for the forge as possible and get those clients to pay as much deposit as possible. We can't afford to lose here, so we have to make all the preparations that we can." Carrie's eyes immediately lit up with excitement and lust as his gaze roamed over the young woman's body. He felt as if he could strip away her dress with his eyes, and he could already envision the feeling of having her soft fair skin and wonderful body under his. He immediately nodded, and said, "Yes, young master, I'll do that right away." "Master Cyril, how could you give me to a blacksmith like this?" The young woman looked at Cyril with a pitiable expression on her face and a hint of fear in her eyes. "Don't worry, I'm just placating him. If I don't give him some motivation, how will he be willing to serve me to the best of his abilities? A man like him doesn't deserve to get his hands on my woman," Cyril said with a disdainful smile. "Really?" A smile reappeared on the young woman's face, and she laid her hands against Cyril's chest in a seductive manner. "That'll depend on your performance." Cyril wrenched her into his arms, and his hands roamed all over her body. "Father, I can see Chaos City. Look, that must be the Aiden Square, right?" Amy was pointing downward excitedly as she sat on the white bird's back. Sure enough, a massive city had indeed appeared up ahead. "That's right, we're home." A smile also appeared on Mag's face as he turned to the southwest, where a tall jagged mountain stood, but his eyes only lingered on that mountain momentarily before he withdrew his gaze. The massive white bird was wearing the crest of the city lord's castle, so it was granted entry into Chaos City without any impediment before landing in the Aiden Square. "Big Sister Mia, Big Sister Aisha, Big Sister Bablat, Big Sister Anna, we're back." Amy jumped down from the bird's back, and immediately ran toward the restaurant with excitement and elation on her little face. One Xiao He literally means little black. It's quite a common convention in China to name pets little followed by a certain color, and it's often used as a generic naming device for animals and pets in web novels. This case is similar to that of Ozzy I. "Boss Mag. Little Amy. I've missed you so much." Before anyone had even emerged from the restaurant, Ma Bai had rushed out of the neighboring forge with a large hammer in his hand and an excited look on his face. "Amy. Boss." The doors of the restaurant were then immediately flung open as Yabimiyu rushed out first in her maid uniform. She wore an elated smile on her face, and her slightly disproportionately large chest jiggled up and down as she ran, creating quite a mesmerizing sight to behold. "Looks like Mia's still growing. She'll probably grow out of those clothes soon," Mag thought to himself as his gaze lingered on the slightly tight-fitting maid uniform for a moment. "Amy." Anna was the second one to rush out of the restaurant, and she also wore a joyful smile on her face at the sight of Amy. Babla was the last one to emerge from the restaurant, and even though she was trying to act more ladylike and reserved, the elation in her eyes was quite plain to see. "Little Amy, Boss Mag, you're finally back. This is splendid news." Zixi made her way out the magic potion shop across the street with a long-necked beaker in her hand. She wore an overjoyed expression on her face while blue liquid swirled within the beaker, and Lulu had also emerged from Ma Bai's forge with a bashful smile on his face. "Big Sister Zixi, Big Bear, Grandpa Ma Bai, Black Coal, Green Pea, are you all here to welcome me back? I'm so happy. Amy waved at everyone as the smile on her face became even more vibrant. Hello, everyone, Mag also greeted everyone with a smile. He then turned to the passengers on the bird's back, and offered, it just so happens to be lunchtime now. If none of you are in a hurry, perhaps you could have some lunch at my restaurant before you go back. My thoughts exactly. Krasu was the first to reply. Novan hesitated momentarily before also rising to his feet with a smile. I'll have to trouble you then, Mr. Mag. Come on, Teacher Luna, Father is going to cook for us. Amy dove headfirst into Mia's embrace before twisting around to wave a little hand at Luna. Luna gave a slightly apologetic smile as she said, then I'll just have to be a shameless freeloader again. The beast tamer that was piloting the white bird was also invited for a meal by Mag. Only then did he disembark from the bird's back before quickly sidestepping a bear hug from Mabai. His entire body was covered in soot, and it was as if he'd just emerged from a coal mine, so Mag really wasn't all that keen on a hug from him. He smiled, and said, Boss Mabai, have you had lunch yet? If not, clean yourself up and come in over for a meal. Can we eat as well? We'll pay, Zixi said with a smile. Sure. This one's on me. Mag nodded with a smile. I'll go get Master Urian. Amy jumped down from Mia's arms before rushing over to the magic potion shop. Why even bother? Krasu grumbled in a disdainful manner. Mag picked up Anna in his arms and patted her little head as he turned to Mia and Bablat. Has anything happened at the restaurant while I've been away? Mia wore a wide smile on her face as she replied, aside from a bunch of customers coming over every day to ask when you'd be back, nothing else has happened. Mag could imagine the scene of the customers lying sprawled out in front of the restaurant's doors with pitiable expressions on the faces. That mental image was rather amusing to him. However, a thought then occurred to him, and he asked, Where's Aisha? Did she not come to the restaurant today? And what about Blower? Is he still not back? The smile on Mia's face faded as a concerned look took its place. Aisha said that she was going on a trip a couple of days ago, and she's still not back yet, but she said she'd be back in time for the reopening of the restaurant. Blower still isn't back, either. I see, a contemplative look appeared on Mag's face. Back when Blower had entrusted Anna to him, he had sensed that there was a hint of finality in his voice, almost as if he was permanently entrusting Anna into his care. Immediately thereafter, Sally had also gone on a mysterious trip. His brows furrowed as he thought to himself, both of them are important figures in the elven race, and they're both quite powerful as well, so surely nothing could have happened to them. Mag put on a comforting smile at the sight of the concerned expression on Mia's and Anna's face, and he consoled, it's all right, they could be on their way back already. Irina had already returned to the Wind Forest, and with her there, Blower's and Sally's safety was most likely assured. Looking at Mag's warm and comforting smile, Mia and Anna were instantly feeling a lot more reassured. All right, let's go in first. I'll prepare some lunch for you guys. Mag carried Anna into the restaurant with a smile as he asked, Anna, have you been practicing your cutting skills these past few days? I have. Anna nodded earnestly. Anna has been really diligent with her knife skills practice. She gets a large bucket of potatoes every day, and chops them down into little cubes, Mia chimed in as she walked in behind them. That's amazing, Mag encouraged with approval in his eyes. Mia then continued, the potatoes were bought from the market by Bablat. She says that there are many kids on the streets with no food to eat, so she prepared those potatoes into potato balls and handed them out to the children. Crap! I was in too much of a hurry to get home, and forgot to prepare food for the kids for these past few days. Luna slapped her own forehead in a self-critical manner as she made her way into the restaurant. She then quickly walked over to Babla with gratitude in her eyes as she said, on behalf of the kids, thank you so much. Mag also turned to Babla with a hint of surprise in his eyes as he smiled, and said, you all did very well. Especially you, Babla. Babla immediately blushed as she avoided Luna and Mag's eyes in a flustered manner. She looked up at the chandelier, and gave an awkward cough as she explained, I didn't want to waste the potatoes. Mag turned to Luna with a smile, and continued, the funds for your foundation will arrive very soon. When that time comes, all of the kids will have food to eat. All of them should be thanking you, Teacher Luna. At this moment, Novan made his way into the restaurant with a smile on his face. The City Lord's Castle and Grey Temple will ensure that all of the money will actually be spent on the children. Chaos School will also use some of those funds to expand the school and hire more staff so we can enroll these kids as soon as possible. Everything is heading in a splendid direction. In that case, shouldn't we have a drink together? Krasu made his way into the restaurant with a smile as he proposed, Boss Mag, can you get us a couple of beers to quench our thirst first? Sure. Take a seat, everyone, I'll go cook. Mag placed Anna down onto the ground before changing into a new set of clothes and entering the kitchen. Meanwhile, Mia had already carried the beer onto the table. Even with Krasu and Urian shooting daggers out of their eyes at each other across the table, Mag's first meal back in Chaos City was quite a warm and enjoyable one. The men were drinking to their heart's content while the women wore gorgeous smiles as they sampled his delicious dishes, and a content smile appeared on Mag's face as he carried a chunk of fish into Amy's bowl using his chopsticks. Never would he have thought that he would have friends that were concerned about him and looked forward to his return home. This was a very wonderful feeling. After lunch, everyone took their leave one after another, and the restaurant fell silent again. Amy and Anna sat at the entrance while playing with Ugly Duckling, and their laughter was even more pleasing to the ear than the bell hanging by the door. Mag rose to his feet, and prepared to carry the empty beer glasses away. However, Yabimiya got there before him, and she smiled as she said, leave everything to Babla and me. You just came back, and you already had to cook for everyone, so you should take a rest. I've already learned how to use the dishwasher. Babla stacked a pile of plates and bowls together before carrying them over to the kitchen. She's a fast learner, Yabimi remarked before covering her mouth with her hand as she whispered in an amused voice, she's just a little shy. Mag withdrew his hand at the sight of the Mia's bubbly smile, and he nodded with a smile. Thanks for your hard work. It's all part of my job, Yabimi replied with a smile before packing up the beer glasses onto a platter and also carrying them to the kitchen. Mag withdrew his gaze, and made his way over to the entrance of the restaurant. Boss Mag! You're finally back! As soon as Mag emerged out of the restaurant, two excited voices sounded in unison, following which two fatsos with a combined weight that surely exceeded 250 kilograms came charging toward him, creating quite an intimidating sight to behold. Yes, I'm back. Mag looked at the oncoming Harrison and George, and he reflexively stepped off to the side in fear of being knocked off his feet by this pair of enthusiastic fatsos. I've missed you so much. I thought you'd abandoned me. Harrison immediately switched directions in response to Mag's sidestep and grasped tightly onto Mag's hand with a pitiable expression, putting on his best impersonation of an abandoned wife. Mag immediately withdrew his hand and stumbled back half a step as goosebumps appeared all over his body. He had to hold back not to kick Harrison away. Mag managed to repress that urge, but George was unable to do so. He planted his foot firmly into Harrison's sizable backside and kicked him aside before appearing in front of Mag with a tense expression on his face. Boss Mag, is the restaurant open for business today? Even though Harrison had just received a kick up the backside, he was not angry in the slightest as he made his way over to Mag again, having also adopted a nervous yet expectant expression. Boss Mag, I've been going hungry for days waiting for your return. Look at me. I'm all skin and bones. Mag glanced at Harrison's portly figure, and it was quite apparent to anyone with a pair of functioning eyes that he was far more than just skin and bones. He shook his head with a smile, and replied, my apologies, but I've only just gotten back, and I'm rather weary after my journey. I haven't prepared any ingredients, either, so I'll be reopening the restaurant tomorrow instead of today. Tomorrow. A disappointed look appeared on George's face. The hope in his eyes faded, and even his shoulders slumped down as if they were bearing a heavy weight. Harrison glanced at George before grabbing onto Mag's hand again in an urgent manner. "Boss Mag, I don't mind coming back tomorrow to eat, but can you make a young Joe fried rice for Miranda? In the days that you've been away, she's barely eaten anything. The midwife says that she's due in the next few days, and this is her 4th child, so she could be in a lot of danger in her current condition." Mag was initially about to withdraw his hand again, but a hint of surprise appeared on his face as he turned to George. In the few days that he'd been away, George really did appear to have aged several years. The dark rings around his eyes were quite heavy, and his face was also rather bloated as he looked into Mag's eyes with a beseeching expression on his face. This was the father of 3 children, as well as the husband of heavily pregnant woman. The thought of the burden on his shoulders tugged viciously on Mag's heartstrings. "My apologies, I was unaware of that. I'll cook your wife a young Joe fried rice and some chicken soup. I wish her and the child a safe delivery," Mag said in an apologetic voice. An elated expression appeared on George's face as he bowed deeply to Mag. "You're not at fault, Boss Mag, I should be thanking you. Boss Mag, you're a good man." Harrison released Mag's hand before patting George on the shoulder, and a wide smile appeared on his face as well. "You're also a good friend," Mag said with a smile as he made his way into the restaurant. As he did so, he invited, "Come in and have a seat." Amy, who was sitting off to the side while playing with Ugly Duckling, suddenly looked up at George with an expectant expression as she asked, "Uncle Blue Fatty, is Aunt Miranda going to give birth to a little baby? Is it really going to be a little sister?" Anna also looked up at George with a curious look in her eyes, clearly also very interested in the prospect of a little sister. Having received a promise from Mag, George was clearly feeling a lot more relaxed. He looked at Amy with a smile, and nodded as he said, "That's right, she's about to give birth, and it's definitely going to be an adorable little princess, just like you." Amy clapped her little hands together with elation. "That's great. I have to go and see her after she's born. I love little sisters." Mag entered the kitchen and carried out the magic high-pressure cooker that he'd bought a few days ago. Taking into consideration that Miranda hadn't eaten much in the past few days, Mag decided against cooking his braised chicken. Instead, he cooked a nourishing chicken soup with goji berries and dates to replenish her body. After that, Mag cooked a young Joe fried rice for her as well. George ordered this dish every time he came here as it was Miranda's favorite. Furthermore, the spring of life had been added to this dish, so it also had very good nourishing and recovery effects, making it ideal for Miranda in her current condition. "This is chicken soup, get her to drink lots of this." Mag carried out the chicken soup in a large earthenware pot. "Thank you." George carefully accepted the pot with both hands as if he were cradling some kind of prized treasure. "I'll take this one. I'll make sure that it gets to Miranda as soon as possible." Harrison also accepted the container with young Joe fried rice from Mag with both hands in an extremely careful and delicate manner. Mag instructed, "The chicken soup can be consumed at night as well after being heated. Come over at around 5 p.m. today, and I'll have another portion of young Joe fried rice ready for you. Make sure she gets as much nutrition as she can during these few days." "Thank you so much." George bowed to Mag as he cradled the pot of chicken soup in his arms, and there were tears shimmering in his eyes. "All right." George carried the earthenware pot out of the restaurant, only to immediately turn around as he said, "I almost forgot, I haven't paid yet." "You don't need to pay for this. It'll be my present to your unborn child," Mag said with a smile. "Don't argue with me on this one, Boss Mag, I'm the kid's godfather." Despite Mag's protests, Harrison firmly placed a bag of money on the table before ushering George out the door with a smile on his face. This is probably what friendship between men is like. Mag picked up the bag of money on the table, and he didn't even have to check its contents to know that Harrison had overpaid. However, he wasn't going to overcharge anyone, so he was just going to have to deduct the extra amount out of Harrison's future meal costs as a discount. Boss really is a good person. Yabimia's eyes were filled with admiration as she looked out at Mag through the kitchen window. Babla was operating the dishwasher in the kitchen, but she also looked out at Mag through the window with confusion in her heart. He really does seem like a good person. The books state that the vast majority of men are bad people, could he be an exception? Even though Mag had made 2 more dishes than he'd planned, he was in quite a good mood, having just done a kind deed. He wrote up another slip that he plastered on the door. The slip read, "I'm back, and the restaurant will be officially reopened tomorrow." Mia and Babla had also finished cleaning up at this point. Even though the process was made a lot more troublesome due to Sally's absence, Mia used her actions to prove that even without using magic, the restaurant could be cleaned and returned to the pristine condition. "Father, can I go and play with big sister Anna in the square?" Amy asked as she held Ugly Duckling in one hand and Anna's hand in the other. "Boss, you take a rest, I'll go with Amy and Anna." Yabimiya rested her hand on Amy's shoulder before turning to Babla with a smile, and asked, "Babla, do you want to come with us?" "Yes." Babla nodded without any hesitation as she removed her apron. She didn't want to stay in the restaurant alone with Mag, that would definitely be super awkward. "You can all go together, then." Mag nodded with a smile. The Aiden Square was quite a safe place, and with Mia as well as the 7th tier magic caster, Babla, by their side, Amy and Anna should be fine. Furthermore, he also wanted to see what changes were going to be made to the restaurant after it was upgraded to level 3. After everyone had left, Mag looked at the shimmering activation button in his mind, and pressed it without any hesitation. Ding! The restaurant has been successfully upgraded to level 3. Activation will require 10 minutes. The system's joyful voice sounded. Immediately thereafter, Mag heard a series of sounds across the entire restaurant as if countless termites were devouring the structure all at once, and the entire restaurant began to tremor slightly. Mag remained quite calm during the renovations. It appeared that the internal structure of the restaurant hadn't changed much, so the upgrade on this occasion was most likely more heavily weighted toward upgrading the restaurant's defenses. In that case, he was feeling a little less expectant. Ding! The restaurant upgrade has been successfully activated. The system's voice sounded again after 3 minutes. System, what changes were made this time? Mag looked around, yet couldn't discover any changes. Even the arrangement of the tables and chairs remained completely unchanged. During this upgrade, the restaurant's passive defense systems have been upgraded to level 5, allowing it to be immune to all attacks below the 5th tier, and an alarm system will also alert you to any attacks against the restaurant. The omniscient door has also been upgraded. Aside from the name, race, gender, and power levels of the people who pass through the door, limited information about their bodily condition will also be on display, including parameters such as blood sugar, blood pressure. What's the point behind all this? I'm a restaurant owner, not a doctor, why do I need to know so many of my customers' health parameters? Mag rolled his eyes, unable to comprehend these upgrades. The most important guarantee any restaurant can make to a customer is to ensure that they'll be able to walk out of the restaurant safely. If the customer is struck by a health condition set off by the food consumed in a restaurant, then that would be a lethal blow to the restaurant's reputation. Analyzing the health parameters of the customers is the best way to avoid such a situation from occurring, the system said in a serious voice. So I have to be a chef and a doctor now. Mag pursed his lips. However, food safety was indeed of the utmost importance to a restaurant, so it was certainly not wrong to prepare for unexpected mishaps. Hence, he reluctantly accepted the system's excuse. But isn't this upgrade a little too bland and uncreative? The restaurant barely feels different from how it was back at level 2, Mag complained. Wrong. The best has yet to come, of course. The main feature of the upgrade is the addition of the newly invented and tested molecular isolation system to the restaurant, the system announced with a hint of pride in its voice. Molecular isolation system. Mag wore a confused expression on his face. That's right. The molecular isolation system is a system through which aromas can be isolated using molecular walls. Put on those glasses over there and have a look. Is it that high-tech? Mag glanced at the pair of glasses on the table to find that it appeared similar to virtual reality glasses. He put them on, and he was immediately given a panoramic perspective that allowed him to see the entirety of the restaurant. Molecular isolation system, activate, the system said. A series of objects that resembled panes of glass appeared within the restaurant, separating all of the seats into independent spaces. So this a molecular wall? Han Li wore an incredulous look on his face as he looked at the wall of light before him, which was shimmering with faint blue light. He hesitated momentarily before reaching out to touch the wall. His hand passed through the wall easily without any impediment, and the molecular wall molded itself to the shape of Mag's hand like a tight-fitting seamless glove. The molecular wall won't obstruct any physical objects, and unless one has done extensive research into molecular technology, they won't even be able to detect the existence of these molecular walls. Aside from being able to isolate aromas, the air in the independent areas can be cleansed by the system to ensure no residual aromas remain, thereby contributing to the ideal culinary experience. What do you think? I'm really awesome, right? The tone of the system's voice was practically screaming, "Hurry up and praise me. It's so. But with this thing, I can sell stinky tofu now." Mag had been completely won over by this piece of cutting-edge technology, but in order not to fuel the system's pride, he had to act calm and aloof. In a small yet intricate courtyard, there was a room with its curtains drawn. Inside the room, a female servant was looking at a woman with a pale complexion lying on the bed. The former wore an urgent expression as she said, "Mistress, please have some food. The midwife says you could be due at any moment now, but you haven't eaten for so many days, things can't continue like this." Miranda lay on the bed with her bulging stomach, looking as if she really were about to give birth at any moment. However, her swollen face was extremely pale, and she opened her eyes in a feeble manner to glance at the bowl of porridge that the servant was holding. Just the sight of the porridge was enough to make her heave and dry retch violently, and she closed her eyes again as she shook her head. "I can't eat anything. Take it away." She knew that she had to eat for her child, but she simply couldn't do so. No matter what she ate, as soon as it entered her mouth, she would begin vomiting until there was nothing left in her stomach, and she couldn't even stomach a single mouthful of white porridge. Nothing like this had ever happened before, not even back when she had Angus. Thinking back to her perilous delivery of Angus, the midwife had told her that she couldn't ever have another child again. Otherwise, it would be the death of her. However, she didn't tell George about this. She wanted to give him a daughter even if it meant giving up her own life in exchange. But, the servant wanted to say something else. Right at this moment, Miranda's stomach belly suddenly churned, and a painful expression on her face as she huddled over like a prawn. She grasped the bed frame with all her might to keep herself from unintentionally hurting the child in her stomach through her violent convulsions, and she moaned with agony as cold sweat poured down her deathly pale face. "Mistress!" The servant hurriedly set the bowl of porridge aside before hurrying over to Miranda's aid. However, she was at a complete loss for what to do, and she could only scream, "Help! Our mistress is about to give birth." The doors of the room were quickly flung open from the outside, and a pair of elderly women strode into the room. One of them grasped onto Miranda's hand with one of her own while using her other hand to gently stroke Miranda's stomach. The churning in Miranda's belly gradually died down, and her painful expression eased significantly. However, following that ordeal, her face had paled even further, and she was truly in a bad condition. The two midwives looked at Miranda, and then glanced at one another before heaving a collective forlorn sigh and leaving the room. There were many people gathered outside the door. Parber was holding tightly onto Parma's hand, while Angus was bawling in the arms of a female servant. All of the family servants had gathered in collective prayer for their kind and benevolent mistress. George's father, Old Man Williams, wore a grim expression on his face. Some of the important figures in the Williams family were also present, and as the midwives emerged from the room, he immediately hurried over to them with a concerned expression. "Has the child been delivered?" "Not yet, master. Her womb is contracting, which means the child is about to be born, but," the midwife's voice trailed off mid-reply. "What is it?" Old Man Williams asked. The midwife hesitated momentarily before replying, "The mistress's is much larger than that of the average woman at this point during pregnancy, so this child is most likely going to be larger than the average child. The problem is that the mistress is very feeble right now, and this is her fourth childbirth, so it's most likely going to be very difficult for her to have a safe delivery." All of the expressions on the faces of the people in the courtyard changed upon hearing this. Everyone knew that Miranda's pregnancy had been quite a rough one on this occasion. Back when she had given birth to Angus last time, she had almost died as a result, but it appeared that this pregnancy was going to be even more perilous than her last one. "What are you trying to say?" Old Man Williams already knew the answer to this question, but he was still desperately grasping at straws, trying to find a glimmer of hope. The other midwife wore a grave expression as she replied, "Master, at this point, it won't do anyone any good if I sugarcoat my words. In her current condition, there is no chance that both the mistress and her child will survive this childbirth. Prior to her next womb contraction, we have to make the decision to save the parent or the child." Everyone turned their attention to Old Man Williams. This was an extremely cruel decision for anyone to have to make, and everyone around him wore sympathetic expressions on their faces. "Mother!" Tears immediately welled up in Parma's eyes. "Big brother, is Mother going to give birth to a little sister for us?" Parber asked as he looked up at Parmer with anticipation in his eyes. Parmer looked down at Parber, and he forcibly suppressed his own sobs as he nodded, and replied, "Yes, Mother is going to. She's going to give birth to a little sister for us. That's great. I'd love a little sister." An elated smile appeared on Parber's face, but the smile quickly faded as a perplexed expression appeared on his face. "But, why are you crying, big brother?" Old Man Williams stumbled back, and only managed to keep himself upright by holding onto a nearby tree. He turned toward the room that Miranda was in, and his eyes were filled with pain and indecision. He looked around before flaring up with rage. "Where the hell is George? Where did he go?" The young master said he was going out for a bit, but he didn't say where he was going," the butler replied. The midwife urged, "Master, we have to make a decision right now. If we keep delaying like this, both the mistress and her child will be in danger. If I make this decision, George will hate me for the rest of his life." Old Man Williams sighed heavily as he rammed a fist into the tree beside him. Some of the younger servants in the courtyard had already burst into sobs. Miranda was so kind and warm, and she treated them like family. The grief seemed to be contagious, and soon even Angus was bawling at the top of his lungs. Old Man Williams hung his head like a broken man, unable to make a decision. No one else dared to say anything, and they could only heave forlorn sighs at this misfortune. The two midwives were unconsciously bobbing up and down with urgent expressions as they awaited Old Man Williams' decision. They had been midwives for several decades, and they'd encountered such situations in the past. Under such dire circumstances, a choice had to be made. If a verdict was delivered too late, both the mother and the child could die together. Just as courtyard had descended into complete silence, Miranda's feeble yet determined voice sounded from within the room. Save the child. Father! You must save the child. I can sense that this is a daughter. George has always wanted a daughter." The women in the courtyard were unable to control themselves any longer as they burst into sobs, and even the men were wiping away tears as they turned their faces away. "Mother! Don't abandon us! Mother, Parmer released Parber's hand as he rushed over fell over at the entrance of the room, bawling with all his might. Sigh, Old Man Williams heaved a heavy sigh and punched the coarse bark of the tree until there was blood flowing from his knuckles. He looked up at the midwife, and croaked, "Save the chi, even if we can only save one, we have to save Miranda." A loud voice suddenly erupted outside like a clap of thunder. Trajay's forehead was pouring with sweat as he barged into the courtyard with his portly body. There was a large earthenware urn in his hands as he strode toward the room, and he yelled, "Open the door, Parmer." "Father!" An elated look appeared on Parma's face, and he scrambled to his feet before flinging open the doors with all his might. Trajay rushed into the room with the earthenware pot in his arms before appraising the semi-unconscious Miranda with a pained yet loving expression on his face. "I'm back, Miranda." "Master Trajay, the mistress is currently..." The midwives immediately followed Trajay into the room with urgent expressions on their faces. "Step aside." "Coming through." Another loud voice sounded as Harrison rushed into the courtyard like a fat hurricane, running faster than he ever had in his life and almost knocking over the two midwives. He then screeched to a halt in the room and panted heavily as he forced a smile onto his face. Take this into the room, and feed it to Miranda. You can save both then." The midwife pushed aside the container in Harrison's hands with a slightly angry expression. "This isn't the time for a meal. If we stall any longer, both of them are going to die." "Oi!" Harrison hurriedly cradled the container in his arms as he flared up with rage. "Calm down. This was made by Boss Mag, and it's Miranda's favorite food. How's she supposed to give birth without any energy?" Harrison dragged a female servant over before thrusting the container into her arms, and yelling, "Hurry up and take this into the room." "Oh!" The servant was a little flustered, but she still did as she was told. "Mother!" Parmer had already collapsed by the side of the bed, sobbing as he looked up at Miranda. "Parmer!" "Trajay!" Miranda opened her eyes as tears flowed down her cheeks. "Miranda, Boss Mag is back, and he cooked you some chicken soup and Yangzhou fried rice. Have some so you have the energy to give birth." Trajay's entire body was trembling as he tipped the porridge from the nearby bowl onto the ground, and then opened the lid on the earthenware pot. The rich and delectable aroma of chicken soup immediately wafted through the entire room. Miranda's nose twitched as she lay on the bed, and a hint of hope took the place of the despair in her eyes. She was suddenly struck by a sense of hunger that had been absent for the past few days, and she felt as if she could eat an entire cow whole. She gulped involuntarily, and the allure of the chicken soup had even made her forget her agony. "Boss Mag!" This is the aroma of Boss Mag's food. A ray of light seemed to have shone into Miranda's heart, and she was even struck by an impulsive urge to sit up. "That smells so good!" The female servant wore an urgent expression on her face, but she still couldn't help but be distracted by the delectable aroma coming from the earthenware pot. However, in Miranda's current condition, would drinking chicken soup really help her? Trajay carefully poured the chicken soup from the pot into the bowl, almost spilling some in the process as his hands were trembling so much. "Chicken soup! Miranda, have some chicken soup!" Trajay hurried over to Miranda's bedside with the bowl of soup while the servant nearby hurriedly placed a pillow under Miranda's head for support. In her current condition, getting her to sit up could prove to be lethal. "Open wide!" Trajay scooped up a spoonful of chicken soup and quickly blew on it a few times before pouring it into Miranda's waiting mouth. The chicken soup was a little hot, but its incredible flavor poured over her taste buds like soothing spring rain. Her lifeless tongue was revitalized, and she felt as if her body had come alive as well. Gulp! Miranda swallowed, and the warm chicken soup trickled down her throat, lubricating her esophagus and nurturing her internal organs. Wisps of energy flowed into her feeble cells, injecting her with renewed energy. What was even more incredible was that the feeling of warmth didn't disappear after entering her stomach. Instead, it traveled to her lower abdomen as if the fetus was also being nurtured. The crippling agony down below was alleviated significantly, and the child also seemed to have been soothed as it ceased kicking in her womb. Miranda's expression immediately eased significantly, and a hint of color returned to her cheeks. The mistress! She drank it, the servant cried with elation. During the past few days, they'd tried everything they could, looking for all types of food to try and stimulate Miranda's appetite, all to no avail, but she was now drinking this chicken soup. Mother, you're definitely going to get better. Parmer was also overjoyed as he clenched Miranda's hand tightly in his own little hands. Here comes some more. Trajay was filled with elation as he carefully fed Miranda another spoonful of chicken soup. Thus, Trajay fed the bowl of chicken soup to her one spoonful after another, and Miranda's complexion improved at a rate that was almost discernible to the naked eye. Trajay rose to his feet to pour another bowl of chicken soup while Miranda held Parmer's hand, and gently crooned, "Don't cry, Parmer, you're a brave boy." Parmer hurriedly wiped the tears from his face as he nodded vigorously. "Yes, I won't cry any more. Good boy." A smile appeared on Miranda's face. Her body was still quite feeble, but her condition had clearly improved significantly. The child in her womb was so still that it was as if it had fallen asleep, and the chicken soup in her stomach continued to supply her with energy. Miranda looked up at the approaching Trajay, and said, "Help me up, I want to sit while I drink." "All right." Trajay looked into Miranda's eyes before handing the bowl in his hand over to the servant. He then carefully helped Miranda up into a sitting position, and stacked a layer of soft blankets behind her back. "The chicken soup is very good." Miranda looked at Trajay with a faint smile on her face. Trajay repressed the sour feeling in his tear ducts as he forced a smile onto his face, and said, "Then drink more of it. Boss Mag says it'll help you." Miranda nodded and opened her mouth. Trajay hurriedly blew on the chicken soup before slowly feeding it Miranda. "Why has it become so quiet in there?" The two midwives wore confused expressions as they stood outside the room. In their past experience, this was supposed to be the most painful period for the mother, and the excruciating pain would take her onto the brink of unconsciousness, but the room was very quiet at this moment. All of the people outside the room were also wondering what was happening. Trajay had suddenly returned before barging into the room with an earthenware pot in his arms. The room then fell completely silent, and even Trajay and Parmer weren't saying anything. This indicated that Miranda's condition had to have improved. Could it be that he had found some kind of miraculous panacea? It must be Boss Mag's chicken soup and Yangzhou fried rice. An elated look appeared on Harrison's face, and his heart finally fell back into his chest. A wave of relief washed over him, and his knees buckled as he sat on the ground, but he was too overjoyed to notice. "Haha, can we save both this time?" After downing 2 bowls of chicken soup, Miranda's complexion had improved significantly, and her entire body had been filled with renewed energy and hope. She could feel that her lower abdomen was very warm and comfortable, and that her entire body had been nourished by the chicken soup. Trajay accepted the fried rice from the nearby servant, then turned to Miranda, and said, "Here's your favorite Yangzhou fried rice. Have some fried rice, then drink some more soup." Both of the servants stood off to the side with expectant looks on their faces. Madame's complexion had improved significantly after drinking the chicken soup. If she were to have some fried rice, perhaps she really would have the energy required for childbirth. The lid on the thermos container was opened, and the aroma of Yangzhou fried rice wafted throughout the entire room. Miranda's eyes immediately lit up. This was the familiar aroma that was so intoxicating to her, and it was what had supported her all the way up to this point in her pregnancy. As her condition had progressively worsened during the past few days, she had realized something. If it weren't for the fact that she's been blessed by all of the delicious dishes cooked by Boss Mag during these past few months, there was no way that she would have been able to persevere to this point. It was Boss Mag's cooking that was keeping her and her child alive. "Here." Trajay scooped up a spoonful of fried rice and fed it to Miranda. The glistening golden fried rice was emanating an alluring aroma, and the rice-sized ingredients presented a wonderful and appetizing color combination. Miranda suddenly raised a hand and grabbed onto the handle of Trajay's spoon. She then looked into his eyes, and said, "Let me." Trajay faltered momentarily before carefully releasing the spoon. Miranda slowly placed the spoon into her mouth and savored the mouthful of delicious fried rice. It was still that familiar flavor, and the egg practically melted in her mouth. The rice-sized chunks of winter bamboo shoots and green peas were refreshing and crunchy, while the rice was chewy and sweet. There were soft pieces of ham intermingled with the grains of rice, and there also seemed to be a delightful undertone of shrimp. All those flavors were present in this single mouthful, and Miranda felt as if there was nothing more delicious in this world. She closed her eyes as a blissful smile appeared on her face. During her pregnancy, the thing that she looked forward to the most was dining on Boss Mag's dishes, as they could make her forget all her discomfort. After swallowing the mouthful of fried rice, a warm sensation flowed through Miranda's entire body. Furthermore, there seemed to be wisps of some kind of mystical energy flowing through her veins, revitalizing her body and clearing her meridians. She shoveled one spoonful of fried rice into her mouth after another, and she found herself completely unable to stop. The sensation of her body being filled with energy was also very exciting for her. She was confident that if she could recover to her normal condition, she would be able to deliver this child. She had 3 children, and there was one yet to be born in her belly. How could she just abandon them like this? A faint smile finally appeared on Trajay's face as he watched Miranda scooping Yangzhou fried rice into her mouth. In the instant that he had entered the room, he had almost collapsed from despair at the sight of Miranda's dire condition, but he had since been injected with renewed hope. Even doctors were unable to do anything to alleviate Miranda's condition, but Boss Mag's cooking had worked like an absolute miracle. "Boss Mag, I don't even know how to thank you anymore," Trajay thought to himself as he poured another bowl of chicken soup for Miranda with a gentle look in his eyes. Palmer looked at the earthenware pot on the table, then at the food container in Miranda's hands, and a contemplative look appeared on his face. The servant who had brought the container of fried rice into the room was absolutely overjoyed, and she hurriedly made her way out of the room. As soon as she emerged out the door, Old Man Williams hurried over to her, and asked, "Is Miranda all right?" Everyone else in the courtyard was also looking at her with rapt focus. The silence in the room left them with no idea what to expect, and all of them were dying to know what was happening inside. Even the 2 midwives both wore curious looks on their faces. They had never encountered such a situation before. Under normal circumstances, Miranda should have already fallen unconscious from her pain. The servant was a little flustered by the widespread scrutiny she was receiving, but she still said, "The mistress has drunk some of the chicken soup brought back by Master Trajay, and she's now eating fried rice. Her condition has improved significantly, and the child had also completely settled down." How is that possible? The midwives were in complete disbelief. They had witnessed Miranda's condition for themselves. She could barely even draw breath, let alone eat fried rice. How had she managed to recover after drinking some chicken soup? Was that chicken soup the nectar of the gods? Yes. Everyone in the courtyard were elated to hear this splendid news. At the same time, all of them began to wonder just what kind of chicken soup Miranda had just consumed to essentially bring her back from the dead. "Haha, this is Boss Mag's chicken soup and fried rice we're talking about here. It'd be strange if it didn't create a miracle." Harrison was still sitting on the ground, but he wore a proud expression on his face. Everyone turned their attention to Harrison upon hearing this. Trajay was currently in the room with Miranda, so they naturally couldn't ask him any questions, but Harrison had come back with Trajay, and he surely knew what was in that earthenware pot and thermos container. The midwife who'd been urging Old Man Williams to make a choice between mother and child earlier was feeling quite embarrassed, and she turned to Harrison with a vehement expression as she said, "What have you fed the mistress? Was it a magic potion?" Magic potions can indeed help the mistress temporarily recover, but they're extremely detrimental to the unborn child. In worst-case scenarios, the child could even be born with a mental disability. In the midwife's mind, only magic potions were capable of facilitating such a miraculous recovery in such a short time. This type of potion was strictly not to be consumed by pregnant mothers, as it would result in irreversible negative consequences to the child. Everyone else was also growing quite concerned upon hearing this. It was common knowledge on the Norland continent that magic potions were not to be consumed by pregnant women. How could we feed her magic potions? We're not idiots. Harrison immediately sprang up from the ground, and composed himself before putting on a smile as he said, "This is chicken soup and Yangzhou fried rice cooked personally by Boss Mag of Mamie Restaurant. He just came back from Rodu after cooking for the king during his birthday banquet. Do you think he'll put magic potions into his chicken soup?" The entire courtyard fell silent, and the midwife opened her mouth, but she didn't dare to raise suspicions against a chef who had cooked for the king. Furthermore, magic potions were far from delicious, and Miranda wasn't even able to stomach any plain porridge, so it was very unlikely that she would have been able to drink a potion and keep it down. As such, all of the people in the courtyard were filled with elation again. I heard that even head chef Beat of the Dukas restaurant wasn't invited to cook for the king during his birthday banquet. Does that mean this Boss Mag is an even better chef than him? I've also heard of Mamie Restaurant. It's a relatively new restaurant, but it's extremely popular, and there's almost always a long line of customers stretching all the way out of the restaurant's doors. If this Boss Mag's chicken soup is this amazing, then wouldn't all pregnant mothers have a much higher chance of smooth deliveries if they were to drink it? Everyone began to discuss spiritedly among themselves, and they were all quite curious about this Boss Mag. His chicken soup had saved Miranda from the brink of death, and he had even been invited to Rodu to cook for the king. Both of those things were quite extraordinary to them. Even after drinking the soup and eating the fried rice, the mistress still isn't out of the woods quite yet. She could give birth at any time. The other midwife wore a solemn expression as she turned to one of the servants, and instructed, "Don't just stand there and watch, go and prepare some hot water." The courtyard gradually fell silent again. Everyone's expression had relaxed a little, but they were still feeling quite tense. Miranda's condition had improved significantly, but the true hurdle would arise when she went into labor. Everything should be fine now, right? Harrison was also growing rather uneasy. He had full trust in Mag's cooking, but it wasn't medicine, after all, and he knew that Miranda had barely survived while giving birth to Angus. Within the room, after eating the entire container of fried rice, Miranda licked it clean before setting it aside, looking as if she could have eaten more. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were glowing. She was looking much better than most pregnant women did on the cusp of labor. Trajay took the empty container from her before carefully handing her a bowl of chicken soup. "Have some more soup?" "Sure. After this bowl, I want to drink 2 more bowls. My stomach has been completely empty during these past few days." Miranda nodded before eagerly accepting the bowl of chicken soup. She ignored the spoon, and pressed her lips against the rim of the bowl before chugging down its contents in mere moments. "I'll get you another bowl." Trajay nodded with a smile before pouring another bowl of chicken soup. Mag had given him a very large container with soup, and even after pouring out so many bowls, more than half of the soup still remained, so it was definitely going to be enough for a meal later that night. After chugging down 2 more bowls of chicken soup, Miranda patted her stomach with a satisfied expression. It had been many days since she had last experienced this feeling of satiation and contentment, and her entire body was warm and full of energy. She was feeling so comfortable that she wanted to fall asleep. Trajay placed the bowl down before sitting at the bedside and looking at Miranda with a warm and gentle expression on his face. As Miranda looked back at Trajay, tears welled up in her eyes, and she whispered, "Thank you, Trajay." "Don't be silly, I should be the one thanking you," Trajay whispered as he scooted over and held Miranda in a gentle embrace. A blissful smile appeared on Miranda's face, but her expression suddenly changed as she laid hand onto her own belly with a painful cry. "Ah! The child! She's coming out, hurry! Get the midwives to come in here." A panicked expression appeared on George's face, and he held onto Miranda's hand tightly as he yelled, "I'm here for you, Miranda, don't worry, get out of here, I'm going to give birth right now. Get them to bring hot water. Hurry." The two midwives who were already standing by the door immediately rushed in. One of them helped Miranda back into a flat-lying position, while the other herded George and Palmer out the door in a rough manner. Miranda forced her eyes open to look at George, who remained resolutely on the spot. "Arg! I'll be fine," she said in a determined manner through her pain, gasping. George picked up Palmer and looked at the midwife with a serious expression as he said, "Regardless of what happens, save Miranda. Choose her over the child. Do you understand? All right, get out." The midwife nodded as he shoved George out the door. Miranda turned to the midwife with a pained expression, and whispered, "Don't listen to him. If the choice has to be made, save the child. Stop talking, mistress, the child is about to come out. Prepare to push. Where's the water? Carry it over here." Miranda's screams erupted from within the room, accompanied by loud words of encouragement from the midwives. The female servants hurried in and out of the room, bringing hot water and towels as required. The entire courtyard was deathly silent. Everyone was looking at the room with tense expressions on their faces, waiting for the final result. Miranda's screams of agony were making them wince. It was very difficult to imagine what kind of pain could draw such screams from a woman who was normally so soft-spoken and gentle. George clenched his fists tightly as the veins on his forehead bulged, and his breathing was also quite rapid. Palmer had his palms together with his eyes tightly shut, seemingly muttering something in prayer. All of the servants hung their heads with pained expressions, sympathizing with her pain and devastated by the fact that she could possibly die from this ideal. The relentless screams erupting from Miranda's mouth were making her throat become quite hoarse. Right at this moment, her screams came to an abrupt halt. All of the people in the courtyard raised their heads in unison with bewildered expressions on their faces. "Wah!" A delicate infantile cry suddenly sounded, and a female servant ran out of the room with elation as she announced loudly, "It's a boy. Both the child and mother are safe and sound." "Yes!" A wave of cheers instantly rang out as everyone exulted with all their might. George was also completely overjoyed, and he felt as if all of his energy had been sapped away, almost causing him to collapse to the ground. Thankfully, someone noticed his unsteady figure, and reached out to catch him before he could fall. "That's fantastic news." Harrison also heaved a sigh of relief before murmuring to himself with a peculiar expression, as expected, "It's another boy, I don't care, I love boys." George snapped as he turned around to glare at Harrison. Harrison shrugged in a nonchalant manner. "I like boys too. Looks like I've got another godson." "Wah!" George took a moment to compose himself, and was just about to enter the room when another infantile cry sounded from within the room. A chorus of two infants crying at once rang out immediately thereafter. Everyone was dumbstruck upon hearing this. The mistress gave birth to another one. "It's a girl this time. They're twins." Another female servant rushed out with joy and excitement on her face. George rushed into the room and over to Miranda's bed, and then gently encircled her body in his warm embrace as tears began to flow down his face. "George, we have a daughter now. We should thank Boss Mag," Miranda said with a feeble smile on her face. The sound of knocking rang out from the entrance of the restaurant just as Mag was making a cake with Amy and Anna. He glanced up at the information displayed by the omniscient door, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face, but he still washed his hands and opened the door. As soon as the door was opened, Harrison yelled, "Boss Mag! I gave birth." "You gave birth? How is that possible, Father?" Amy poked her head out from behind Mag and appraised Harrison's portly stomach with a confused expression. "Grandpa told me that men can't give birth." Anna also stuck her head out from behind Mag on the other side with a serious look on her face. Mag suppressed the urge to chuckle as he looked at Harrison, and asked, you mean Miranda gave birth, right? Yes, yes, yes. Harrison slapped his forehead with a bashful smile on his face, and said, I misspoke because I was too excited. Miranda just gave birth, and she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Wow, a new little sister. Amy's eyes immediately lit up. And a new little brother, Anna added with curiosity in her eyes. That's right. Miranda's only just given birth, so George couldn't make it in person, and he asked me to come and thank you in his stead. Harrison extended a formal bow toward Mag, and said, if it weren't for your chicken soup and Yangzhou fried rice, Miranda and her twins would have been in deep trouble. There's no need to thank me, anyone would have done what I did in that situation. I'm really glad to hear that they're all safe and sound. Mag shook his head with a smile, but there was an indescribable sense of satisfaction in his heart. During his previous life, he had lived in an extremely willful manner, and was denounced and cursed by countless people as a result. Even God had punished him by sending him to this world. However, he had now saved a mother and her 2 children, and received genuine gratitude for his good deed. This feeling was far better than that of being cursed and scoffed at, and he felt as if he'd found his purpose in life. Not only could a chef satisfy people's taste buds, they could even save lives. Father, can we go and visit the little sister? Amy asked as she looked up at Mag. Anna was also looking at Mag with anticipation in her eyes. George says that he'll come to thank you in person when he gets some free time. I have to tell the others about this, so I'll be taking my leave now. Harrison chuckled as he prepared to depart. Mag glanced at the 2 pairs of expectant eyes looking up at him, and he hurriedly asked, can you tell me George's address? I want to visit the 2 newborns. Thus, Harrison gave him an address before quickly departing. I'll take you 2 to see the new little sister and little brother in a couple of days. Mag patted Amy and Anna's heads with a smile on his face before taking them back to the kitchen to continue making their cake. The news of Mag's return was very exciting for his customers, but all of them were struck with dejection again at the sight of the new sign plastered to the restaurant doors. Sigh, I know Boss Mag is in there, but I can't taste his delicious roast beef, this is an excruciating feeling. I want to smash this door open, then abduct Boss Mag and lock him in a small dark room. I'll force him to keep cooking without pause, and I won't let him out until I'm satisfied with his food. Does anyone want to join me? Bro, calm down. If you knock this door down, you're going to have to answer to 2 great magic casters, a principal, and a city lord. Are you sure you want to give it a shot? Oh. The sky is so blue today. The customers discussed spiritedly among themselves in front of the restaurant for a while, and even though they were quite frustrated, they could only depart in a resigned manner. Dinner was steak and ice cream cake. Anna and Amy had participated in the entire cooking process, so the meal tasted especially delicious to them. After dinner, Yabimiya made her way over to Mag with a curious expression, and asked Mag about what had happened during his trip to Rodu. In response, Mag gave them a brief account, skipping over many important details for obvious reasons. Yabimiya's, Babla's, and Anna's eyes lit up as they listened to his story. By the conclusion, all of them were staring at him with incredulity in their eyes. You're so awesome, boss! You can even win the Best Dish award at a royal banquet, that's amazing! Yabimiya stared at Mag with amazement and admiration in her eyes. Uncle Mag is the best! Anna's expression also mirrored the one on Yabimiya's face. Best Dish award, sounds pretty good, Babla intentionally stifled her wonder and gave an aloof response. Father was super awesome. When his dishes were carried into the palace, no one could look away, so of course he's number 1, Amy said with a proud expression. Mag was naturally quite pleased by the admiration that he was receiving, and he dined on his steak with a smile as he said, this is ice cream cake that even the king didn't get to taste, and he'll never get a chance to eat this black pepper steak, either, so you should have some more of it and savor every bite. After dinner, as Yabimiya and Babla were clearing the table, Mag poured a cup of water for himself, then turned to the two of them, and said, "By the way, I prepared a staff dormitory for you two and Aisha. If all goes well, you should be able to move in the day after tomorrow. It'll be safer for all three of you to live closer to the restaurant." A dormitory. Yabimiya and Babla both faltered upon hearing this. Mia shook her head, and said, "Boss, the place I'm currently living at is quite cheap, and it's very clean as well, so you don't have to prepare a dormitory room for me. I'll make sure to be on time for work every day." "Are you kicking me out?" Babla asked with a hint of panic in her eyes. She didn't know what a staff dormitory was, but she had deduced that Mag was asking her to move out of the restaurant. She still had yet to grasp what kind of world this was. There were men on the streets blatantly holding women's hands and even circling their arms around women's waists. This world was way too dangerous for women. At present, the restaurant was a safe place for her to stay, but she was naturally feeling quite flustered at the prospect of having to leave. Mag looked at Babla and shook his head with a smile as he replied, "I'm not kicking you out, I just think it's a little inconvenient for both of us for you to live here. If you live together in the staff dormitory, the three of you will be able to look after each other." He didn't like to live with other people, and getting Babla to live at the restaurant was only a temporary arrangement. He had already decided to transform the second floor of Ricky's rotisserie into a dormitory for Yabimiya and the others to live in, as he wasn't planning to expand by opening a new branch there anyway. "Is that so?" Babla immediately calmed down a little. Living together with Mag really was a little awkward for her. It would certainly be a lot more comfortable for her if she could live with Aisha and Mia instead. "Mia, this is a staff benefit, and I'll also feel better knowing that the three of you are able to live together and look after each other. You three are the most important elements of this restaurant," Mag said with a serious expression. Yabimiya was always thinking for the sake of others, and it was time for him to return the favor. Yabimiya looked into Mag's gentle yet resolute eyes, and a hint of warmth flowed through her heart. Following a brief moment of hesitation, she finally nodded with gratitude, and said, "Thank you, boss." After breakfast, Yabimiya set off joyfully for the ice cream after securing a promise from Mag to teach her how to make ice cream cake when they had some spare time together. She was planning to fill up all of her free time during the day. Amy was still calculating math problems, while Mag instructed Anna in her knife skills. He then left her to practice on her own in the kitchen, and went upstairs to read a history book about the Norland continent. This history book was split into two parts, with the first part mostly detailing legends about the races during ancient times. It even included records of the origins of some races. The information perhaps wasn't all that reliable, seeing as the events being recounted were from so long ago, but it still made for an interesting read. During ancient times, the humans were a tribal race with frail bodies, struggling to survive in a world ruled over by more powerful races. Survival was their key priority, so they naturally didn't pay much attention to recording their history. As a result, almost no events were recorded in the history books regarding the human race during this period of time. In the second part of the book, it said the organization known as the Church appeared 10,000 years ago, and it was also around the same time that magic casters and knights first began to emerge among the human race. Thus began the resurgence of the human race as the divided tribes forged alliances, and began to slowly become more powerful throughout the course of the war among species, becoming one of the 8 major races in the end. Mag looked at the historical records detailed in the book, and a contemplative look appeared on his face. The Church seemed to be a savior that had swooped in when the human race needed it the most, providing cultivation methods for magic casters and knights alike, thereby completely changing the fate of the human race. However, how did an organization like the Church come about during an era when all humans were hunters and gatherers that were far too busy trying to ensure their own survival to dabble in religion? Even after reading through the entire book, Mag still didn't find any additional information about this. There was only a brief passage that caught his attention, stating that the first magic casters were known as witches, and they were exclusively female. The Church really is a mysterious organization. Mag closed the book with a thoughtful look on his face. Due to the fact that Amy had been promised the position of Pope by the current Pope, Mag wanted to understand more about this organization. However, the records in this general history book were far too vague and abbreviated. He was going to purchase some books with more detailed information about the church in the future, thereby allowing him to understand just what kind of entity it was. Can I borrow those? All of a sudden, Babla appeared before Mag, and she pointed at the two books in front of him with an inquisitive look on her face. Of course. Mag looked up at Babla with a smile, then stacked the two books together, and offered them to her. As a transmigrator, it was naturally very important to read about the history of this world, and then reinvent their perspective on the world based on that. Mag had obtained a portion of Alex's memories, thereby instilling him with Alex's worldview and allowing him to skip that process, but after Babla had arrived in this world, she'd spent most of her time in the restaurant, so it would be a good thing for her to read about this world's history. Thanks. Babla carried the two heavy books in her hands as she plodded her way upstairs with an elated look on her face. Why was there a teleportation formation in the Moon Nation that led to this continent? Why was the language used in this world completely identical to that used in the Moon Nation? Why was it that women seemed to hold an inferior status here rather than the other way around? These were all questions that she wanted to have answered, and perhaps these two history books could provide those answers. Mag shook his head with a smile. Babla's ability to adapt had already far exceeded his expectations. After all, she had been a pampered regal princess in the Moon Nation, yet she had been spontaneously teleported to a completely unfamiliar world, and became a waitress at a restaurant. This stark contrast was certainly not something that anyone could come to terms with so quickly. After checking the answers of the arithmetic questions that he'd left for Amy, Mag entered the kitchen to find that Anna was still chopping potatoes with rapt focus in her eyes. Her knife tapped onto the chopping board in clean and precise strokes that were also very rhythmic and steady. The steel pot beside her was already filled with tiny pieces of potato that were comparable to grains of rice, and each and every piece was extremely even, just as if they'd been measured using a ruler. You've improved a lot. You can stop here after finishing with that potato. Mag appraised Anna with a hint of approval in his eyes. Making such progress over the span of around half a month was quite remarkable even for an adult, let alone a 5-year-old child one. Anna nodded in response as a smile appeared on her face, but her hands remained steadfast and accurate as she continued with what she was doing. Mag stood at the entrance to the kitchen with a smile on his face, and he thought to himself, this must be what talent looks like. Perhaps she really will become an exceptional elven cook. Instead of throwing away the potatoes that Anna had chopped up, Mag made them into mashed potatoes before forming small potato balls. He then dipped the balls in some egg, and applied some breadcrumbs before deep frying them until they were crispy and golden brown to create a dish enjoyed by people of all ages. Amy bit into the golden potato ball in her hand with a crisp crunch. The egg and breadcrumbs had developed a particularly rich flavor after being deep fried, and the soft mashed potato beneath the crispy outer layer was a little hot. The sweet and mellow flavor of the potato melted on her tongue, and Amy's eyes immediately lit up with elation. Potato balls are so good. They're crunchy and sweet and delicious. Anna also picked up a potato ball, and bit into it before a contemplative look appeared on her little face. Compared to steamed potato balls, these ones are a lot richer in flavor, and the crunchy exterior coupled with the soft interior has a much better texture as well. The secret lies in the egg and this golden powder, and a lot of oil needs to be used. The potato balls then have to be fried 3 times, and it comes out absolutely delicious. Let's go and give the rest of these to those who haven't eaten yet. Mag placed the potato balls into the bags for Rugiamos, and handed Amy and Anna a bag each before placing the rest into a thermos box. They had already had dinner, so they clearly couldn't finish all of these potato balls, and these things had to be eaten while still hot to ensure the best flavor and texture. As opposed to letting them go to waste, it was much better to give them to those who needed them. Mag and the two girls handed out the potato balls to the homeless people in the Aden Square before returning to the restaurant. After brushing their teeth, the two girls changed into clean pajamas and lay down on the little bed together, listening to Mag's bedtime story with rapt focus. Ugly Duckling was situated between them with its head peeking out of the blanket and one of its little paws resting on Amy's body. It had fallen asleep as soon as its head hit the pillow. The story of the Smurfs drew to a conclusion. Amy was already asleep by then, but Anna still had yet to fall asleep. "Do you still not want to sleep yet, Anna?" Mag asked with a smile. There seemed to be something on her mind. "I'm worried about Uncle Blower and Big Sister Aisha." When Big Sister Aisha left, she said she was going to find Uncle Blower, but neither of them have come back yet, Anna replied with a concerned look in her eyes. Ring! Ring! Boss Mag! Boss Mag! Mag was just about to say something when the sound of the doorbell rang out alongside a few muffled yells. One Ed/N, I'm pretty sure she was 6, 7 years old, but the author has a tendency to make children age in reverse. Literally, Amy ended up being a year younger some 100 to 200 chapters ago, and it stuck, but we decided to fix that for the author, so take it with a pinch of salt. Blower? Mag glanced at the information displayed by the omniscient door, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face. Is that Uncle Blower's voice? Anna sat up with an elated look on her face. Mag smiled and nodded as he said, "That's right, Blower's back. Why don't we go downstairs to greet them?" "Yes." Anna carefully emerged from under the blanket, and then tucked it around Amy before quickly putting on her little slippers and following Mag downstairs. Mag switched on the light in the restaurant before quickly opening the doors. Sally and Blower stood outside with the latter in female attire, and both of them were looking quite disheveled. Behind them stood close to 100 elves with their clothes in tatters. The autumn nights were quite cold, so many of the children among them were shivering. Most of these elves were women and children, and they all appeared to be quite exhausted yet slightly fearful as they looked at Mag. However, they then caught sight of the warm light in the restaurant, as well as the beautiful decor within the building, and their eyes lit up in unison. Mag couldn't help but falter slightly upon seeing this. For a split second, he had thought that he was looking at a group of refugees. In his heart, elves were all graceful beings that valued their cleanliness very highly. How had they been reduced to such a pitiful state? Anna emerged from behind Mag, and she looked at the cross-dressing Blower with a hesitant expression as she asked, "You Uncle Blower?" "Anna. You see," Blower leaned down and rubbed his hands together in a rather awkward manner as he looked back at Anna. He didn't think that his cross-dressing fetish was anything to be ashamed of, but he was still rather concerned that Anna would renounce him because of it, so he was scrambling for a way to explain himself. Much to his surprise, Anna charged over and jumped into his arms before winding her little arms tightly around his neck. Blower's mouth gaped open slightly as he stiffened on the spot, and only after a while did he slowly wrap his arms around Anna as a vibrant smile appeared on his face. "I was afraid that you'd left just like Grandpa." "I don't want you to go," Anna sobbed. "I'm not going anywhere, so don't you worry." Blower patted Anna's back in a comforting manner. After hugging Blower for a while, Anna let go and wiped away her tears before turning and throwing her arms around Sally. "Don't cry, Anna." Sally wiped away the tears in Anna's eyes, and stroked her hair as a smile also appeared on her face. "I'm glad you're back." Mag appraised the two of them with a smile, then turned to the elves behind them, and said, "From the looks of it, you've done something quite praiseworthy as well." Blower looked into Mag's eyes with a beseeching expression, and said, "Boss Mag, I have a request, can you please cook a meal for all of my brethren here? They haven't eaten for 2 whole days, and they've walked all the way here. I'll pay for all of their meals." Sally was also looking at Mag with an expectant look in her eyes. She opened her mouth to say something, but swallowed her words in the end. Mamie Restaurant was a high-end restaurant. It was always kept pristine and tidy, yet these elves had been locked up in underground cellars for a long time, so they were all quite dirty and, quite frankly, rather smelly. They had been concerned that they'd encounter other mercenary squads that would hunt them down in the past 2 days, so they had been traveling without rest, thereby affording them no time to wash. As such, it would be very understandable if Mag were to turn down this request. Anna looked at all of these elves, and tears began to well up in her eyes again. She didn't know any of them, but she had already guessed that they had to have been captured by those abhorrent demons, while Blower and Sally were the ones who had saved them. Looking at them evoked within her memories of her grandfather. Only then did she understand why her grandfather refused to allow her to be captured even at the expense of his life, and she turned around to look at Mag with tears swimming in her eyes. Mag looked at the elven children with a sympathetic expression on his face. He couldn't see any noticeable wounds on their bodies, but the inferiority and fear in their eyes tugged directly at his heartstrings. What kind of torture had these children endured to become like this? Those demons really did deserve to die. Come in, I'll cook for all of you. Mag stepped aside with a gentle smile on his face, leaving the entrance open to everyone. Blower extended a deep bow toward Mag as he said in a solemn voice, "Thank you. Thank you, boss." Sally also nodded as she expressed her gratitude. "Uncle Mag is the best." Anna looked up at Mag, tears swirled in her eyes, but she forced them back in the end. The elves entered the restaurant. Due to limited number of seats, many of the elves could only stand. Some of the children managed to share a chair in twos, while others carefully sat on the ground. The pleasant warmth in the restaurant made the elves a lot more relaxed, and they began to inspect their surroundings with curiosity in their eyes. The beautiful decor, the warm chandeliers, the intricate wall art. Everything was so surreal in their eyes after that nightmarish ordeal. Even though they were feeling slightly more relaxed, the elves were still extremely subdued and self-conscious. Even the elves who were sitting the ground were kneeling as they did so, not wanting to dirty the floor with their shoes or take up any extra space. Mag went upstairs before quickly returning. He looked at Sally with a smile, and said, "Go and take a bath, Aisha. I've prepared a set of clothes for you in the bathroom." Sally wanted to refuse as she shook her head. "I'm fine." However, Mag cut her off as he continued, "With so many customers, I need your help. In your current state, I can't allow you to serve food in the restaurant." Sally looked at her blood-stained clothes and nodded before quickly heading upstairs. "Boss Mag, do you need a hand from me?" Blower asked. Mag shook his head with a smile as he replied, "You can take a seat. I'd never ask for help from one of my customers. Is big sister Aisha back?" Babla had heard what was going on downstairs, and she looked at all of the elves in the restaurant with a surprised look on her face. "That's right." Mag nodded as he turned to Babla with a smile, and said, "I'll be requiring your help as well." Soon, one cup of water after another flew out of the kitchen before landing in front of the elves with unerring accuracy. The water in the cups didn't even ripple in the slightest in the process, and all of the elves could only look on with astonishment and admiration in their eyes. After taking a bath, Sally came downstairs in a floral kipao, and her dazzling beauty stunned all of the elves present even further. Inside the kitchen, all of the stoves had been switched on, and Mag was cooking multiple dishes like a master chef. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, several portions of Yangzhou fried rice were ready. The rate at which Mag was cooking was simply phenomenal. "These dishes are ready to be served," Mag said as he cleaned his pot, while Babla stared at the 20 portions of Yangzhou fried rice on the counter with her mouth gaping in shock. That was so fast. It took Babla a while to collect herself before she returned to her senses, and she pointed a finger at the portions of Yangzhou fried rice, sending them flying out of the kitchen toward the elves waiting outside. One plate of fried rice after another flew out of the kitchen, heading toward the elves situated the closest to the entrance of the kitchen, and the alluring aroma of fried rice wafted throughout the entire restaurant. The colorful Yangzhou fried rice appeared as if it had been made from chopped up rainbows, and they were being served on simple yet elegant white plates. There was no need for any embellishment or decorations, as the fried rice itself was already extremely beautiful and alluring to behold. Gulp! Gulp! The sounds of gulping and growling stomachs immediately rang out across the entire restaurant as all of the elves stared at the plates of Yangzhou fried rice flying out of the kitchen. Such a ridiculously delectable aroma had already far exceeded their imaginations. The plates gently landed in front of the elves closest to the kitchen with unerring accuracy, and there was a spoon resting on the side of every plate. The elves who had received plates of fried rice were at a slight loss for what to do. They were unable to look away from the beautiful dishes presented to them, but none of them picked up their spoons, and the atmosphere became a little awkward. Having just finished cleaning his pot, Mag made his way over to the kitchen's entrance, and then looked at the elves with a smile as he said, "Eat up. Everyone will get a portion eventually, but you'll have to wait for a little while." All of the elves looked at the benevolent smile on Mag's face, and even though he was a human, they couldn't help but want to trust him. After receiving permission from Mag, all of the elves picked up their spoons and began to scoop fried rice into their mouths. All of them felt as if a flavor explosion had been set off on the tips of their tongues, and the irresistible flavor combination made it impossible for them to stop. Furthermore, there was a faint fragrance that didn't belong to any type of discernible ingredient, but it was very pronounced, and further enhanced the flavor of the dish. Even after swallowing their mouthfuls of rice, this special flavor still remained on their palate, leaving a delectable aftertaste. The children were unable to identify what this fragrance was, but it gave them a sense of warmth, and as the fried rice slid down their throats, they felt as if they had been injected with exuberant life force. The hunger in their bellies disappeared, and their stomachs felt really warm as if the fried rice was warming them up on the inside. "It tastes so good. I've never had anything so good before. It's a shame that my little sister will never get to eat this. This must be the best food in the world. How could food possibly taste this good? It feels so warm and so comfortable. I miss Mommy." The elves stared at the plates of Yangzhou fried rice with incredulity in their eyes, and some of the little elves were even shedding tears, while the wounded hearts of some of the elves were slowly being healed by the warmth flowing through their bodies. However, in the end, the delicious flavor of the fried rice won out above all else. None of the elves present had had a decent meal for a long time, and they completely threw their table manners out the window as they shoveled spoonfuls of fried rice into their mouths. Meanwhile, the elves who had yet to receive their portions of fried rice gulped down countless mouthfuls of drool, and the intensifying hunger in their stomachs was striking them with the impulse to gnaw at the tables before them just to get something that resembled food, even just a little, into their mouths. "I'll help you, Uncle Mag." Anna put on her little apron and carried her stool into the kitchen with a serious look on her little face. Mag turned to Anna with a smile before placing a plate of winter bamboo shoots on the counter beside him. "All right, then please chop these up just like you practiced with the potatoes." Anna nodded with an earnest expression as she carried the plate of bamboo shoots over to her small designated area before chopping them up in a diligent manner. 5 pots were being used at once as one portion of Yangzhou fried rice after another was loaded onto plates, and then sent out to the elves by Babla and Sally. 1 portion of Yangzhou fried rice per elf was nowhere near enough, but their hunger and feebleness had already been completely alleviated, and their tired minds were much refreshed now. This was the same as the feeling of being healed by the elven princess in the wind forest, and all of the elves were basking in their newfound warmth and comfort. The elves who had eaten vacated their seats politely to those who hadn't yet done so. Even though they were all extremely disheveled and their clothes were in tatters, the graceful elves still hadn't forgotten their manners. Words of praise rang out incessantly, and the elves' faces were filled with bliss. It had been so long since they had smiled and laughed from the bottom of their hearts like this, and they were filled with renewed hope for their future in this city. A positive beginning always instilled within one glorious vision for the future. Sally and Blower looked at the blissful smiles on the faces of their brethren, and they also smiled. If a happy new beginning could be presented, then there was still hope in life. "When I grow up, I'm going to become a chef who brings happiness to people," just like Uncle Mag. Anna's eyes were filled with admiration as she looked up at Mag. All of the elves had already eaten at this point, and Mag brought out 2 more portions of Yongzhou fried rice as he turned to Sally and Blower with a smile. Everyone else has eaten, so it's time you two had some food as well. Blower looked deep into Mag's eyes, and said in an earnest voice, "Thank you. You're welcome. You look like a little sissy right now, but you've done something very manly." Mag chuckled in reply. "You seem to be praising me, but why does it sound so weird?" Blower raised his eyebrows with a smile as he ate spoonfuls of fried rice with immaculate table manners. As he did so, he praised, "Only such delicious food can match my beauty." "Thank you." Sally extended a grateful bow toward Mag before also scooping a spoonful of fried rice into her mouth, and her eyes shut with bliss. As the familiar delectable flavor blossomed in her mouth, she felt as if all of the hardships she'd experienced during this journey had been wiped away. The tension and residual anxiety also gradually disappeared, and when she opened her eyes, she was greeted by the sight of the same familiar restaurant and the pair of ever-gentle eyes. This warm sensation gave her the feeling of home. After the two finished their portions of fried rice, Mag asked, "What are your plans from now on? If I'm not mistaken, it won't be easy for you to take care of these elves with your identities." All of the elves also turned to Blower and Sally upon hearing this. Even though they had arrived at Chaos City, they still didn't know where they were going to stay here. Blower and Sally glanced at each other, and their expressions were both rather complex. Indeed, it would be quite detrimental to the two of them if it were revealed they were taking care of these elves. In that case, they would be seen as enemies of the elven race and even their own families, and that was certainly not a good thing for their long-term plans. "I'll get the elven embassy to organize lodgings for them. I should be able to keep things a secret for now." Blower's voice was a little unconvincing, and it was quite clear that even he didn't know how long he'd be able to keep everything confidential. "A month? A week? Or perhaps as little as a single day? Princess Irina saved us, and told us that no one would come after us. Does that mean the demons won't ever try to catch us again?" an elven child asked in a feeble voice with a hint of fear in his eyes. Mag was rather surprised to hear this. Blower clenched his fists under the table, and was at a loss for how to reply. "Leave this to me, I'll take care of all of them," Mag said as he turned to the elves in the restaurant with a serious expression, and announced, "She's right, no one will come after you, and no one will ever hurt you again." The city lord's castle located in the eastern part of the city was still brightly lit, and there were still many employees entering and exiting the buildings as if there were no end to the work that they had to do. In a quiet study located in the western part of the city lord's castle, there were 2 figures standing in front of a desk with solemn expressions on their faces, inspecting a map of the Norland continent. After a prolonged period of silence, Novan sighed. "The re-signing of the peace treaty in 3 months most likely won't progress very smoothly. Alex isn't dead, and he killed Benson as well as 6 other 10th-tier beings from the demon, orc, and forest troll races. Even though they've been dealt a heavy blow, their alliance won't be willing to swallow this bitter pill. No, what we have to worry about right now isn't them, it's what he thinks," Michael said as he slammed his hand onto the word Rodu on the map. The restaurant suddenly fell silent, and all of the elves stared at Mag with incredulity in their eyes. The restaurant owner who had just provided them with an unparalleled culinary experience was now also going to be looking after them? They had suffered a horrendous ordeal at the hands of the demons, and even though Princess Irina saved them in the end, she had only guaranteed that no one from the Wind Forest would hunt them down again. But why was this restaurateur, an ordinary human, offering to help them? And how was he going to help them? Blower and Sally were also staring at Mag with unadulterated shock in their eyes. Boss Mag was undeniably a good person, but he was also most definitely not someone who liked to attract trouble, so why was he suddenly offering to take care of these elves? Could it be that he had some kind of brilliant plan in mind? Uncle Mag really is a good person. Anna stared at Mag and recalled that night at the entrance of the restaurant. Mag was far from the most powerful being on the scene, yet he had been the first one to charge out of the restaurant while wielding his chef's knife. Indeed, Mag wasn't someone who liked to attract trouble. Even though he was very sympathetic toward these elves, working overtime and cooking this meal for all these elves was already the extent of what he was willing to do. As for where these elves were going to be settled in Chaos City, that was not his concern. However, after hearing that Irina had been the one to save them, those words suddenly slipped out of his mouth. Mag looked at all of the astonished eyes that were fixed on him, and he heaved an internal sigh. Seeing as he had already made a promise, he was going to see this through to the end. Thus, he turned to Blower and Sally, and said, I have a few connections in the city lord's castle, perhaps I can get them to provide us with some assistance. If all of you want to settle permanently in Chaos City, you'll be able to receive protection from the city lord's castle and the Grey Temple if you become legal citizens of the city. We can become citizens of Chaos City. All of the elves' eyes lit up upon hearing this. They had heard some stories about Chaos City, depicting it to be safe haven for elves where they didn't have to worry about being attacked and hunted by demons. However, due to the pressure that the Wind Forest was exerting on Chaos City, it had become exceedingly difficult for elves to become citizens here. But now, Mag was claiming that he could organize for them to become citizens of the city. This was undoubtedly fantastic news for them. Can you really do that? Blower was also elated to hear this. He had considered getting the Elven Embassy to arrange citizenship for all of these elves, but in that case, Ingw and the entire embassy would be seen as the enemies of the Elven race, and it had yet to be seen whether the embassy would even be able to organize citizenship for the elves in the first place. However, if Mag could correspond directly with the city lord's castle to organize a place for the elves in Chaos City, then that would undoubtedly be the best solution. Mag nodded with a smile, and said, I'm not sure if I'll succeed, but I'll do my best. Thank you. Blower rose to his feet and extended a deep bow toward Mag. All of the other elves also rose to their feet and followed suit in order to express their gratitude toward this human who they'd only just met, yet had provided them with an incredibly delicious meal, and was now going out of his way to help them. There's no need to thank me, everyone. My daughter is a half-elf, so we're all friends here. Mag smiled as he said, let's go to the city lord's castle now. I have limited space here, so I won't be able to accommodate all of you, perhaps the city lord's castle will have a better solution. All right. Blower nodded in response. Mag then turned to Sally, and said, Aisha, Amy is still asleep upstairs. If you don't mind, can you look after her for me? If you're tired, you can sleep here tonight as well. Sally hesitated momentarily as she looked into Mag's earnest eyes, but she nodded in the end, and replied, I can do that. Anna, you go back to bed as well. Uncle Blower will come to pick you up tomorrow. Mag stroked Anna's hair with a smile on his face. It was quite cold outside, and both he and Blower were going to be quite busy, so it was best for her to stay at the restaurant for one more night. All right, Uncle Mag. Anna nodded obediently before latching onto Sally's hand and giving her a warm smile. Thanks for your hard work, Mag said to Babla with a smile on his face. Babla's spatial magic had made the serving process a lot more efficient tonight. It appeared that the more customers there were, the more her abilities would come in useful. Babla wore an indifferent expression on her face, but the corners of her lips perked up ever so slightly as she turned around, and said, if there's nothing else for me to do, then I'm going back upstairs to read my book. Blower leaned down with a smile on his face, and said, good night, Anna, I'll come to pick you up tomorrow. It's a promise, then, Anna said with a serious look on her little face. For sure. Blower nodded in response. Mag led the elves out of the restaurant, and headed directly toward the city lord's castle. The group of around 100 elves naturally drew a lot of attention from the passers-by on the streets, and everyone was wondering when so many elven beggars had appeared in Chaos City. Blower wasn't traveling with the rest of the elves. Instead, he was walking along quite a distance away to avoid having any connections drawn between him and these elves. The city lord's castle was still brightly lit by the time the group arrived, and the guards outside the gates all wore tense expressions while placing their hands on the hilts of their long swords at the sight of such a large mob approaching the castle. "Wait here for me for now." Mag indicated for everyone to stop before hurrying over to the guards alone. "Greetings, Boss Mag. Why have you come to the city lord's castle at such a late hour? And who are those elves?" The leader of the guards was quite relieved to see that Mag was the one leading the group. He had been one of the guards present during the conference between the dragon and the demons held at Mamie Restaurant, and after that, he'd become a loyal customer of Mamie Restaurant, heading over for a Rugiamo whenever he had some spare time on his hands. "I have something to report to the city lord in person, so I hope you can report this matter to him." Mag had naturally also recognized this leader of the guards as a regular customer at the restaurant, but seeing as this was an official setting, he didn't try to use this personal relationship between restaurant owner and customer to his advantage. "All right, please wait for a moment, I'll inform the city lord right away." The guard leader nodded before quickly departing. The city lord had issued orders that if Mag were to visit the city lord's castle, the city lord had to be immediately informed. "Oh? Boss Mag has come to our city lord's castle with over 100 disheveled elves? Could it be that this has something to do with the incident that took place in the Wind Forest a couple of days ago? But Boss Mag only arrived back in Chaos City today, how has he gotten himself involved with these elves?" A hint of surprise appeared on Michael's face after hearing the guard leader's report, and he turned to Novan as he asked, "What do you think, Novan?" "Mr. Mag is both a kind and courageous man, so I'm not at all surprised that he's involved himself in this matter," Novan immediately replied. Michael faltered slightly upon hearing this before a smile appeared on his face, and he instructed, "Take Mr. Mag to the side hall. It's quite cold out there tonight, so get the elves to have a seat in the western hall first, and prepare some tea for them." "Yes." The guard leader quickly departed. "Thanks for your hard work, Novan. You're really busy with all the things going on in Chaos School at the moment. I really shouldn't have asked you to go on this trip," Michael said in an apologetic manner. "You're far more busy than I am, so you certainly can't go, and we definitely can't count on Roland, so who else could have gone aside from me?" Novan shook his head with a resigned look on his face before asking, "The feasibility of the railway and steam train still hasn't been verified yet, are you sure you want to organize so many people to promote it?" Michael smiled as he replied, "Didn't we decide that if we want to bring true peace to Chaos City, we have to get rid of the concept of borders? During the past 100 years of hard work, Chaos City had mostly managed to accomplish this. However, if we want to promote this concept in the entire Norland continent, the best course of action available to us would be to make the territories of other races more accessible, thereby allowing all beings on the continent to familiarize themselves with the territories and cultures of other races. That's the most important step to uniting the continent under a banner of peace." Novan's brows were furrowed slightly as he listened with a contemplative look on his face. "Think about it, if humans, elves, demons, giant dragons, all types of beings are crammed into the same train carriage to embark on a journey together, and this becomes a regular occurrence all over the continent, won't that be the best way to allow different races to come together? On top of that, doesn't this concept remind you of something?" Michael continued as he looked at Novan. Novan's eyes immediately lit up as he said, "Mamie Restaurant. That's right. Boss Mag's genius truly astounds me. Perhaps he understands the true meaning of peace better than we do." Michael sighed with a smile on his face. "It is indeed quite fortunate for our Chaos City that he wishes to stay here." Novan nodded with an earnest expression. "I think it's time we become more daring and ambitious as well. Chaos City can no longer just act as a neutral entity and detach itself from the rest of the world, a symbol of peace. We have to start taking some initiative in order to bring about the changes we want to see," Michael said with a solemn expression. "Are you referring to that?" Novan turned to Michael with a surprised look. "We can start there." Michael nodded in response. After all of the elves were organized into the western hall, Mag nodded with a content expression before following a guard toward the side hall. Congratulations on receiving the Best Dish Award at the Royal Banquet, even though I don't think it was ever in doubt. Michael's boisterous voice sounded outside the door not long after Mag had taken a seat. Mag looked up just in time to see Michael walking into the room, and he smiled as he rose to his feet. "You're far too kind, City Lord. Take a seat." Michael sat down in the chair beside Mag, and asked, "Why have you come to visit me at this hour?" Mag really enjoyed the straightforward manner in which Michael spoke. He immediately began to recount to Michael the horrific experiences that the elves had suffered at the hands of demon and orc mercenaries. Michael listened with a dark expression and tightly clenched fists, seemingly willing himself to repress his own fury. "These elves claim to have been saved by the elven princess, and one of my customers brought them to my attention. Almost the exact same thing has happened right outside my restaurant once, and on that occasion, 5-year-old Anna lost her grandfather. Prior to that, her parents had already passed away." Mag looked at Michael with an earnest expression, and said, "I don't have the power to stop all this from happening, nor am I able to punish those who benefit from these heinous deals, but I hope that our Chaos City can accept and protect them as citizens of the city. I've heard a lot about the situation you're talking about already. Chaos City has accepted some of these elves in the past, but due to the pressure exerted on us by the Wind Forest, we've been forced to adopt a more neutral stance regarding this matter." Michael nodded as he said in a grim voice, "However, I didn't think that there was such a sinister chain of events taking place behind the scenes. Even though this is a civil conflict within the elven race, the demons and orcs are clearly in the wrong for taking advantage of the situation in order to benefit themselves. The incident that took place in Chaos City last month has been a real wake-up call for me, and I've already established a few bases outside Chaos City. If those mercenaries dare to target any of the elven inhabitants of Chaos City, then they'll be punished by the laws of our city." Mag nodded upon hearing this. As the city lord of a neutral city, Michael couldn't afford to completely go against the will of the elven race, but at the very least, he was still striving to protect the inhabitants of his city, and that was quite uplifting for Mag to see. "The same thing has happened over and over again right under our noses. I truly feel ashamed of the decision I made 10 years ago." A self-critical expression appeared on Michael's face as he clenched his fists, and said, "After a verification process, these elves will become citizens of and receive protection from Chaos City. The children of suitable age among them will be enrolled into Chaos School, and those above that age range will be given jobs so they can settle in Chaos City. I'll receive a public announcement tomorrow, stating that all elves in need of protection can come to Chaos City. Chaos City will protect them. That's the Chaos City I know and love. Thank you." Mag rose to his feet before extending a deep bow toward Michael. "I also thank you for choosing Chaos City on behalf of our entire city." Michael also responded with an earnest bow of his own. Both of them then smiled as they looked at one another. "Men sure are strange," Vivian murmured to herself as she looked at the two people in the room through the window, "but that man really does seem like a good person. Even though he already has a daughter, if Luna really likes him, let's go and visit the elves. I hope they quickly come to love our Chaos City as well." Michael led the way out the door. Mag followed closely behind him, yet just as he was about to leave the hall, he caught sight of a figure disappearing in a flash through the window. Vivian is just as cheeky as ever. She always likes to eavesdrop on my conversations, but she bears no ill will, and she won't reveal what we talked about to anyone, Michael said with a doting smile on his face. Mag smiled and nodded, and as he looked at the smile on Michael's face, he felt as if he were looking at himself in the future when Amy became all grown up. Regardless of whether she grew up or not, she'd always be a child in his heart. Michael paid a visit to the elves and welcomed them to Chaos City in person, informing them that the city lord's castle would help them settle in this city. All of the elves wept for joy, and they bowed over and over again toward Michael and Mag to express their gratitude. Mag looked at the tears on the children's faces with a heavy heart. He could help these children settle in Chaos City, but there were still countless elves living in the same nightmare that those elves had just been freed from. However, with Michael's promise, it was most likely that more and more elves would come to Chaos City for refuge, thereby reducing the instances of similar tragedies. Mag followed the workers from the city lord's castle to the residential area where the elves were going to be settled, and when he finally emerged from the city lord's castle again, it was already midnight. Michael insisted on getting someone to transport him back to the restaurant via a horse-drawn carriage. After disembarking from the carriage, Mag thanked the driver before making his way toward the restaurant. There was still a small lit lamp left within the restaurant to light the way for him, and he tore the notice off the door before carefully entering the restaurant. After locking the doors, Mag crept silently upstairs and opened the door to his room, which was slightly ajar. Amy and Anna were sleeping on the little bed, and Sally had already fallen asleep on his bed. Mag looked at the smile on Sally's smiling face, and he shook his head with a smile of his own. It was quite apparent that the journey she had just undertaken had truly exhausted her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have fallen asleep on his bed. His gaze trailed down her legs, which were sheathed in skin-colored stockings, and his eyes settled on the pair of black leather shoes on her feet. It appeared that she had only intended to take a small nap, which was why she had neglected to take off her shoes. However, Mag simply couldn't bear to wake her up. After standing beside the bed with a hesitant look on his face for a long while, he finally extended his hands toward her long and slender legs. 10 minutes later, Mag heaved a long sigh of relief, and he stood up from the bedside, but his legs were feeling a little weak. During the past few minutes, he learned that it was not an easy task to remove a woman's shoes without alerting her to what he was doing. Mag looked at the shoes in his hands, and shook his head with a resigned expression. This was the first time that he'd done something like this. Even though Sally hadn't woken up, she seemed to have sensed that her feet were no longer being restricted, and she rolled over before curling up slightly, withdrawing her feet from the side of the bed as she did so. As a result, her kipao tightened around her body and her long legs, creating a rather seductive scene under the dim light of the lap. However, Mag remained unfazed as he gently pulled the blanket on the bed over her body, and then tucked the blankets around Amy and Anna under them in a more secure manner. He stood by their bedside and looked at them with a doting smile before pulling out a set of pajamas and a chef's suit from the closet, and then carefully tiptoeing out the door. After brushing his teeth, Mag went downstairs and bartered with the system for a while before purchasing a blanket, and then settling down behind the counter for the night. It's been a while since I released a new dish, perhaps it's time I learned to make stinky tofu. Mag looked at the shimmering golden experience bag in the corner of his mind in a hesitant manner for a while, but refrained from opening it in the end. Instead, he asked internally, "System, can I purchase a gas mask in the trial space? I can't even bear the smell of stinky tofu from afar, let alone make it at close quarters. On top of that, I might have to repeat the process countless times, I may literally suffocate to death from the smell alone. The trial space is not actually a physical space, so gas masks cannot be brought into it. Furthermore, as a chef, it's important to be able to constantly smell what you're making, as the nose is one of the most useful tools a chef possesses. If you can't even do that, then you're not fit to be a chef. Only by experiencing the different degrees of putridity firsthand can a chef gauge the ideal level of stinkiness to make the perfect stinky tofu." I'm quoting directly from a Weibo post that you released after passing by a stinky tofu stall in your past life. The system was clearly taking pleasure in Mag's misfortune. Mag opened his mouth, but he was at a loss for words. How could the system use his words against him? Besides, he couldn't even recall that Weibo post, so it had to have been something that he'd written on a whim. Then I'm not going to learn it, Mag said with a disdainful roll of his eyes. If you choose not to learn how to make stinky tofu and are unable to successfully produce stinky tofu, then the system will terminate your path to becoming the god of cookery due to personal reasons. The system's voice became rather stern as it spoke. So what? Once your path to becoming the god of cookery is terminated, you'll be erased from this world. At the same time, due to the fact that you've already perished in your original world, you would truly cease to exist. F***ck. Mag furrowed his brows as he clicked open the shimmering golden experience bag. A vast stream of information surged into his mind, following which he attained the experience of a stinky tofu master chef. Hey, so stinky tofu isn't actually cooked using SHT, Mag murmured to himself with a surprised look on his face before continuing to process the influx of information. I can tell how horrendous this is going to smell just by looking at the cooking process. Mag made his way into the kitchen with a suicidal expression, and then downed a glass of ice water to strengthen his resolve. After that, he returned to the lounge chair, draped the blanket over himself, closed his eyes, and opened the doors of the test field for the god of cookery. Compared to tofu pudding, making stinky tofu required far more complex procedures. Just the brine alone required several steps to make, and even after the enhancements the system had made to the process to make it more efficient, it still required 3 days to make one batch of brine. As for the production of tofu, that was the easiest part of the challenge for Mag. The process was quite similar to that of making tofu pudding, with only a few slight changes to some of the steps, so he'd be able to master it in no time. Due to the fact that time was accelerated in the test field for the god of cookery, Mag's first batch of brine was soon ready. He arched his back and lifted the lid with a reluctant expression on his face. Even though he was already mentally prepared, he discovered that he had still significantly underestimated just how putrid the brine would be in the instant that he removed the lid. The abhorrent odor struck him like a sledgehammer, causing him to stumble backward until his back hit the wall behind him, dropping the lid in his hand in the process. This was an indescribably putrid odor, one that surely even an exploding sewage pipe couldn't compare with. It was as if all of the putrid odors in the world had been combined, and then exploded in unison. Holy F***ck. System, get me out of here. I don't want to become some bullsh**t god of cookery anymore. Mag yelled as he slammed the wall and pinched his nose with all his might. After entering the test field for the god of cookery, you'll only be able to exit after you've mastered the dish or after 365 days have passed, the system refused in a calm voice. F***ck. Mag's face was turning red from oxygen deprivation, so he was forced to draw in a breath. As soon as the putrid odor entered his nose, his face turned deathly pale, and he passed out on the spot. After a long while, Mag finally crawled up from the ground with a suicidal expression, and then made his way over to the pot of brine like a zombie. He looked at the black substance within the pot, and a ferocious look appeared in his eyes as he picked up a ladle before downing a mouthful of brine. What are you doing? This is the test field for the god of cookery, drinking brine to commit suicide won't work here, the system yelled in a panicked manner. The cold and ferocious look in Mag's eyes was quite unsettling even to the system. Much to Mag's surprise, the putrid brine was unexpectedly gentle on the tongue, and the stinky odor gradually disappeared, leaving behind a rich aroma that spread over his palate. The aroma didn't belong to any ingredient or condiment, but was completely unique instead, and it was particularly rich and tasteful having been fermented for so long. Gulp. Mag swallowed the mouthful of brine, and its unique flavor lingered in his mouth for a long time before finally dissipating. So this is what it tastes like. Mag slowly opened his eyes as a surprised look appeared on his face. Stinky tofu was one of the foods that were on his taboo list, and he'd never understood how anyone in the world could bear to stomach such a foul-smelling dish. However, the mouthful of brine he'd just tasted had completely changed his impression of stinky tofu. What kind of flavor combination would result from this rich brine and tofu? Mag was starting to look forward to this new creation. After the rich flavor dissipated, the putrid odor wafting through the air struck Mag again, and even though he didn't spring back like last time, he still couldn't help but take a step backward. He resisted the urge to take another sip of brine just to escape this horrible smell, and closed his eyes to calm down. He tried to truly inhale the odor in the air in an attempt to pinpoint the rich aroma he'd identified earlier, and then focused on that particular aroma. When he opened his eyes again, the smell in the air didn't seem to be as abhorrent as before. Even though it still wasn't a good smell by any stretch of imagination, it was bearable at the very least. The complex cooking process meant that he'd have to spend more time to perfect every step, and he also had to ensure that all of the steps connected with each other seamlessly. This meant that there was also more potential for error. No good. No, it's still a little off. Mag wallowed in the putrid odor, and continued to make stinky tofu like a madman while the system rejected him over and over again. He had already forgotten the putrid odor as his nose was dissecting the aroma in the air, trying to break it down into its individual constituents before finding the best combination. Beep, 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 beep. Sally was woken up by a strange sound at 5 a.m., but she didn't want to open her eyes as she lay under her warm and comfortable blanket. She had never felt so comfortable before, and it was as if she'd sunk deep into a cotton ball. Wait. This is... Sally abruptly opened her eyes as she looked around at her surroundings, which were familiar yet alien at the same time, and her eyes gradually widened. A thought then occurred to her, and she abruptly turned around, heaving a sigh of relief when she discovered that there was no one lying next to her on the large bed. She then swept her blanket aside to find that she was still wearing her clothes and stockings from the day before. Her kipao was a little creased and disheveled, but that was only normal seeing as she'd slept an entire night in it. Only then did Sally completely relax as she recalled the events that had unfolded the night before. After tucking Anna into bed, she'd planned to lie down on Mag's bed to take a rest, but she was so tired that she slept all the way until morning. Sally immediately blushed as the fact that this was Mag's bed dawned on her. Who would have thought that she would sleep an entire night on a man's bed? Wait. I feel like I was wearing my shoes when I lay down yesterday, so why? Sally turned to discover a pair of black leather shoes placed neatly beside the bed. Could it be? Sally suddenly recalled that she'd dreamed of ants crawling over her feet the night before, and the recollection made her blush deepen even further. She knew that Mag wasn't the type of person to take advantage of her, so he'd most likely taken off her shoes so she could have a better night's sleep. However, the thought of a man taking off her shoes and touching her feet in the process still filled her with humiliation and anger. Hey? Why are you here, big sister Aisha? Where's father? Amy had just been roused by the alarm, and she turned to Sally with a confused look on her face. Did you not go back last night, big sister Aisha? Did you sleep with Uncle Mag? Anna also sat up before turning to Sally with a curious look. Ugly Duckling was doing his best not to fall off the bed, but it was also staring at Sally with wide eyes. Sally looked back at the curious trio, and a panicked look that completely belied her usual calm and aloof demeanor appeared on her face. She hurriedly waved her hands, and explained, "It's not what you think." Wow! This is the first time something like this has happened. Amy jumped down from the bed, and then rushed over to the larger bed. She picked up a corner of her blanket with a curious look on her face, and asked, "So where's father hiding?" Hey? He's not under the blanket. Perhaps under the bed. He's not under the bed, either, Anna replied with a shake of her head. Ugly Duckling rushed over to the closet in an excited manner before pawing at the closet's doors. Amy and Anna immediately rushed over to the closet and flung open its doors, only to find that there was nothing in there aside from piles of neatly folded clothes. He's not in here, either. Both Amy and Anna were looking rather disappointed. Phew, Sally heaved a sigh of relief before she realized what was happening, and she was suddenly struck by a sense of exasperation. Why did she feel as if she'd just dodged a bullet? Nothing had happened. So why did she feel like a naughty child who had been caught doing something wrong? It's all right, big sister Aisha, we haven't found father, but we refuse to believe that nothing happened between the two of you, Amy consoled. I heard from a storyteller that some things will happen when a man and a woman lie down on the same bed, but Grandpa always covered my ears when the storyteller reached that part in the story. However, I'm sure it's something quite important, Anna chimed in with a nod of her head. Sally looked on at the two little girls with her mouth slightly agape, and she suddenly felt as if there was no way that she could talk her way out of this situation. Don't worry, big sister Aisha. If you don't want other people to know, then we'll keep this a secret, Amy said with a smile before putting on her slippers and running downstairs. After reaching the bottom of the staircase, she just so happened to bump into Mag, and she immediately asked, "Father, did you sleep with big sister Aisha?" Hey! Mag had just re-emerged from the test field for the god of cookery, and he hadn't even really come to his senses before such a spontaneous question was thrown at him. He looked at the curious Amy, as well as Anna, who was just coming down the stairs, and he finally realized what had to have happened. The two girls must have discovered Sally sleeping on his bed, and then jumped to some premature conclusions. Considering the terrible outcome that a misunderstanding of this nature could lead to, Mag hurriedly shook his head with a smile, and replied, "Of course not. I went out to do something last night, so I asked big sister Aisha to stay behind and look after the two of you. After I came back, I slept on this chair for an entire night, so I didn't sleep with Aisha." "I see." Amy was rather disappointed at the sight of the blanket draped over the lounge chair. "Big sister Aisha tucked me into bed yesterday, and she must have fallen asleep as well because she was too tired," Anna chimed in with a nod and a sympathetic look on her face. "All right, I have no choice but to believe this, then." Amy nodded before turning to Mag with a curious expression as she asked, "What are we having for breakfast, Father?" Anna also turned to Mag with anticipation in her eyes upon hearing this. "You can order anything you like from the menu, and I'll make it for you." Mag heaved an internal sigh of relief. Thankfully, Amy was a little foodie who was easily distracted by food. He could only hope that she would have already forgotten about this by the time they met Irina again. Upstairs, Sally was adjusting her clothes while walking out of the room. Her cheeks were still quite flushed, and her mind felt quite fuzzy. She'd never been in a situation like this before, and she didn't know what kind of strange things the two little girls were going to say, so she had to go and stop them. Clack! Sally had just emerged from the room when the door of the room across from this one also opened, and Babla emerged as she rubbed her bleary eyes. Their eyes met, and both of them instantly froze on the spot. Babla's eyes roamed over Sally's disheveled hair and clothes, then settled on her flushed cheeks, and her eyes gradually widened as if she'd just discovered an unspeakable secret. Sally looked on as Babla's eyes gradually widened, and she was only growing more flustered as she scrambled for a way to explain herself. The two of them stood across from each other, and the atmosphere was quickly becoming very awkward. After a long while, Babla finally broke the silence as she asked in a quiet voice, "Big sister Aisha, did you sleep with boss?" Sally had a mental breakdown. Mag was finally able to resolve this fiasco after vehemently and truthfully denying the notion that he'd slept with Sally. However, the atmosphere at the breakfast table was still rather awkward. Sally, who sat across from Mag, ate her fried rice with her head lowered. She had already reverted back to her normal calm expression, but she was still avoiding Mag's gaze. Amy and Anna were completely immersed in their food and eating to their heart's content, but Babla was a different story. She was staring at Mag and Sally with a judgmental look on her face, trying to identify any signs that were even slightly suspicious. Thus, the usual cheerful atmosphere at the breakfast table was absent, being a little gloomy and subdued instead. Yabimiya was eating a rugiamo, and she'd also clearly noticed the strange atmosphere. Her golden dragon tail swished behind her in a slightly nervous manner as she asked, "What happened? Why are you all so quiet?" Last night, big sister Aisha Amy, who had just swallowed her mouthful of tofu pudding, was about to say something, but she was cut off by Mag. Aisha came back quite late last night, and even though she already had some sleep, she's still a little tired. Today is the first day of our restaurant's reopening, so we might be quite busy, Please mentally prepare yourselves. Mag didn't know what Amy was going to say, but he wanted to stamp out this rumor as effectively as possible. Otherwise, if it were to spread, disastrous consequences could result. That's right, Big Sister Aisha came back really late last night, and Anna says that she brought back many elves with her. Big Sister Aisha is a hero. Amy turned to Sally with admiration in her eyes. It's really great that Aisha's finally back. We've been so worried about you. Yabimiya also turned to Sally with a smile on her face. She'd been constantly feeling a little uneasy during the past few days when Sally had been away. Indeed, we're very glad to have you back. Mag nodded with a smile. Seeing the concern in Yabimiya's eyes and the gentle smile on Mag's face, Sally was feeling a little better. Besides, she already knew that Mag wasn't the type of person who would take advantage of her, and that he'd clearly only taken off her shoes so she could sleep more comfortably, so there was no reason for her to continue to feel so awkward. With that in mind, she smiled and nodded as she said, "It's good to be back." The awkward atmosphere melted away with Sally's smile, but there was still a slightly peculiar look in Sally's eyes as she looked at Mag. After breakfast, the restaurant was finally open for business again. 2 long lines had appeared outside well in advance, amounting to a total of over 100 customers eagerly awaiting a meal. Thank heavens Boss Mag is back. I was this close to going to Rotu to find him. I know, right? I was worried that the king would force him to stay in the palace as a royal chef. I'm really glad he came back. Boss Mag must have intentionally lowered his cooking standards during the royal banquet. Otherwise, with his cooking skills, there's no way that the king would let him come back. If I were the king, I'd make sure that Boss Mag stayed even if I had to lock him up in the palace. All of the customers were discussing among each other with excited expressions on their faces. It was quite a rare sight for the sweet and savory factions to be coexisting in harmony like this. Who says Boss Mag lowered his cooking standards? My brother-in-law was present at the royal banquet, and he sent me a letter from Roju yesterday. He says that Boss Mag received the Best Dish Award at the royal banquet, but he refused the king's offer to become the head chef of the royal kitchen. He refused this opportunity that all chefs dream of, a young man in a set of lavish robes in the line announced, and he was spurred on by the widespread attention he immediately received as he continued, "Do you know what excuse Boss Mag used to reject the king? What was it?" All of the customers were quite curious. Boss Mag told the king that he has a bunch of customers waiting for him back in Chaos City, so he refused this brilliant opportunity and insisted on coming back. The young man suddenly raised his voice in a vehement manner. The customers outside all fell silent in unison for a moment before a loud commotion erupted once again. Boss Mag gave up on such a fantastic opportunity for our sake. I'm so touched. Mamie Restaurant for life. Boss Mag really is a good man. Emotional resonance was quite a strange phenomenon. Just a short sentence convinced all of the customers that it had been worth waiting for Mag for 5 days. They were being held in higher regard than even the king, which was an extremely touching notion. If the same choice were to be placed before them, there was no one who would dare to say that they'd make the same decision. Soon, the story of how Mag had secured the Best Dish Award at the royal banquet was adapted into many different editions. The contest itself had been quite simple, but the dramatic renditions made it sound as if he'd had to fight his way through countless obstacles before finally rising to the top, clinching the Best Dish Award while standing atop a mountain piled up using the remains of countless chefs. There was also an edition of the story where Mag had seduced one of the female servants, thereby convincing her to offer his dishes to the king first, which was how he'd managed to make a strong first impression before any of the other chefs. Mag wanted to find the person who had fabricated that edition of the story and give them a solid slap to the face. The royal banquet that had taken place in Rodo became the hottest topic among all of the morning customers, and all of them knew that all of the spiced-up stories were merely dramatic renditions. However, the fact of the matter was that Mag was the only chef from Chaos City to be invited to the royal banquet, and he also secured the Best Dish Award. That was a legendary feat in itself, even without the need for any embellishments. After all, there was no other occasion on the entire continent that could draw so many renowned chefs to one place. After breakfast, Mag pushed his bicycle out the door. Krasud's breakfast was sitting in the basket of the bicycle. He smiled and greeted all of the customers lining up in front of the restaurant, and was slightly taken aback with how harmoniously the sweet and savory factions were coexisting with each other. Amy climbed onto the rear seat of the bicycle before turning to everyone as she said, "Do you think you should have sweet tofu pudding for breakfast or savory tofu pudding?" "Of course it's sweet tofu pudding. Savory tofu pudding is trash. *T. Savory tofu pudding stands at the pinnacle of all appetizer dishes." Mag shook his head in a resigned manner while Amy burst into giggles, and he got onto the bike before riding it toward Chaos School. After returning to the restaurant, the sweet and sour factions were still engaged in a heated argument. There were even some very logical and well-researched points being raised, giving Mag the impression that the feud between the two factions was significantly improving their debating skills. The restaurant was opened for business, and all of the customers flocked in before making their orders. Perhaps it was due to the fact that they hadn't tasted Mag's food for a few days, but all of them ordered more than they normally would. This was the first breakfast service since Mag's return, so there were also more customers lining up than usual. As such, Mag was cooking as quickly as he could, and dishes were being prepared and brought out with startling efficiency. All of the customers were also quite self-aware in that they would immediately pay and leave after having their meals, thereby vacating their seats as quickly as possible for the customers lined up behind them. By the conclusion of the breakfast service, Mag's wrists were feeling quite sore, and he heaved a long sigh of relief. Cooking for 300 people within 90 minutes was not a simple task for him, even with his current bodily constitution. However, seeing all of the blissful smiles on the faces of his customers struck him with an immense sense of satisfaction that vindicated all of his efforts. Mag removed his apron and emerged from the kitchen with a glass of water, while Sally, Yabimiya, and the others cleaned up the restaurant. At this moment, a burst of knocking sounded, and Mag carried his glass of water over to the door before opening it. Gloria was standing on the other side of the door in a long blue dress, with her wavy golden locks trailing down her back as usual. She looked up at Mag with a smile, and asked, "Mr. Mag, may I have some of your time?" "Of course. The restaurant is still being cleaned at the moment, so please take a seat over here, young Mistress Gloria." Mag was slightly surprised to see Gloria, but he still led her over to the outdoor dining area with a smile on his face. "I heard that you received the Best Dish Award at the Royal Banquet. I must congratulate you, Mr. Mag," Gloria said with admiration in her eyes as she took a seat. "Thank you," Mag replied with a nod before smiling as he asked, "Have you prepared all of the dresses already?" He had heard from Gloria about her competition with Cyril. Mag would naturally rather see her win as he was far from a fan of this second young master of the Moreton family. As Mag currently was, the Moreton family was still a colossus that he couldn't contend with. In the face of such an immense entity, it would be far wiser to infiltrate it from the inside rather than directly strike it from the outside. Furthermore, it was not difficult to deduce the reason behind Gloria's visit. After all, she surely hadn't come here just to make small talk with him. Gloria nodded in response with a proud look on her face. "We have. The tailors are gradually becoming more skilled in their roles, so their efficiency had markedly improved. The first batch of dresses that we had planned has already been produced, and the high-end dresses were carefully examined multiple times before they were delivered to the customers. The other 2 styles of dresses will also be officially released tomorrow." "That's fantastic news. As long as quality can be ensured, increasing the rate of production is one of the best ways to improve revenue," Mag said with an appreciative nod of his head. "If the blue suede textiles shop is too small an area, perhaps you can think about finding a factory that specializes in this area of production. We're trying to offer a high-end shopping experience for our customers, so it would not be ideal if the customers were to visit your store, only to find that it resembled a production factory more so than a luxury clothing store. A contemplative look appeared on Gloria's face upon hearing this, and her eyes quickly lit up as she nodded in reply. I see what you're saying. I'm going to move all of the tailors and their equipment out of the shop today and give them a more suitable work environment. We're already deep into fall, so there won't be a lot of time before these dresses become phased out for winter clothes. During my spare time at Rodu, I drew up 2 more designs, and I can give them to you now. Regularly releasing new products is a good way for a clothing shop to remain relevant to female consumers, Mag said before rising to his feet and making his way into the restaurant. You drew up 2 designs in your spare time? That's amazing. Gloria's mouth was slightly agape, and the admiration in her eyes only grew more pronounced as she looked at Mag. The first 3 dress designs were absolutely stunning, even the most seasoned tailor might not be able to come up with such brilliant designs. However, Mag was telling her that he'd drawn up 2 more designs during his spare time in Rodu. That was incredible. Gloria felt as if she didn't even need to look at the designs to know that they were definitely quite splendid, and this sense of blind trust surprised even herself. Mag re-emerged from the restaurant with 2 rolled-up sheets of A4 paper and a glass of water. He placed the glass of water down in front of Gloria, and then handed the sheets of paper to her with a smile as he said, "These are just a couple of errant designs I drew up, it's yet to be seen whether they'll receive a welcome reception." The system made those designs, the system roared. The system's objections were completely ignored by Mag. He'd bought the designs, so he had no qualms claiming them as his own. As for the system's human rights, the system wasn't a human, so it had no such rights. Gloria carefully untied the string that had bound the 2 designs before slowly unfurling the sheets of paper. She was greeted by the sight of a long grey top with a wide folded collar. The garment extended down past the knees with a sash around the waist that would perfectly accentuate the wearer's slender figure, creating a very flattering and fashionable effect. Even though it was only a 2-dimensional design, just the sight of it was enough to mesmerize Gloria. "It's so beautiful," Gloria praised after finally returning to her senses. Even though she hadn't seen this design being made into actual clothes, she knew from the moment that the design was revealed to her that it would most definitely be very popular among all women. There was even a split second where she was struck by the impulse to keep this design to herself. How wonderful would it be if she could be the only one to own such a beautiful piece of clothing instead of having to sell it to others. However, her sense of reason told her that she still had a long way to go if she wanted to become the designated heir of the Moreton family, and the first step would ensure her victory over Cyril in this contest. This is a windbreaker. The design is more 3-dimensional, so it can't be produced using silk or other materials with lackluster firmness and structural integrity. As for what specific materials should be used to make it, the tailors will have a better idea of that than I do, Mag cautioned with a smile. He was a complete amateur when it came to tailorship, so he didn't dare to make any executive decisions. However, Mag was still feeling quite pleased with Gloria's admiring expression. After all, it was difficult not to be happy when such a fine beauty was looking at him in such a manner. Gloria nodded earnestly, and committed this piece of advice to memory before unfurling the other design with an expectant look in her eyes. The second design was also for a windbreaker, except the previous one was more refreshing and elegant, yet this black one was more of a bold statement piece. The wide hem and the conspicuous style was also quite appealing, but it wasn't as suitable for her in a stylistic sense. "Mr. Mag, you really are a genius. Even tailors who've been in the trade for several decades are in awe of your creativity. I'm sure these 2 windbreakers will stand at the height of fashion leading up winter. I'm sure they'll be revered by all women in Chaos City." Gloria praised in an earnest manner as she carefully rolled up the 2 designs again. "You're far too kind, young Mistress Gloria." Mag shook his head with a smile. Even though he knew nothing about clothes designs, he did have a good discerning eye. These 2 windbreakers were of completely different styles, but both of them had their own unique appeal that could satisfy the needs of different women. After that, Mag spoke with Gloria about the foundation that Luna was founding. Gloria had promised to donate 10% of the Blue Suede Textiles shop's earnings to the foundation, and Mag had also made the same promise with his ice cream shop. However, he had been too busy lately to actually set this into motion. I've already asked the accountant to make some preparations for the donations. At the conclusion of this month, I'm planning to tally up our profits before making a donation to the foundation. After that, we'll make bulk donations once every season. Due to the fact that this is supposed to be a clothing fund, I would like to ensure that all the money will contribute toward making clothes for the children in need, Gloria said as she looked at Mag. Mag nodded, and replied, I can see that you've put a lot of thought into this matter. I also plan to do the same, as making bulk seasonal donations will be the easiest way to keep track of things. Thank you for your designs, Mr. Mag. I have to find a more suitable workplace for the tailors, then move all of their equipment over, so I'll be taking my leave, Gloria said before departing. Mag looked on at the departing horse-drawn carriage, and a faint smile appeared on his face. This young mistress had been too afraid to even reveal her features to everyone not long ago, but perhaps she'd become a splendid businesswoman in the future. Mag was just about to stand up and return to the restaurant when a glossy black horse-drawn carriage approached the restaurant. The carriage stopped in front of the entrance of the restaurant, and Sheer disembarked from it in her usual red dress. She stood at the top step of the carriage, and looked down at Mag with a smile as she greeted, "Long time no see, Mr. Mag." "Indeed. You look well, young Mistress Sheer," Mag replied with a smile. Compared to the innocent little white flower that was Gloria, this young Mistress Sheer was a seasoned thorny rose, and he had to be a lot more careful when dealing with her. Sheer got down from the horse-drawn carriage with a smile on her face before taking a seat across from Mag. "I heard that King Andre asked you to stay at the palace as the head chef of the royal kitchen, and I was worried for a long time that you'd agreed. I was really relieved to hear that you'd returned to Chaos City. If a genius like you were to be confined in the royal palace as a chef, then that would be a terrible waste. Even here in Chaos City, I'm still just a chef, so it's certainly not a terrible waste. I'm merely doing my job," Mag replied with a shake of his head before looking into Sheer's eyes as he asked, "However, a busy woman like you certainly wouldn't have the spare time to visit a chef like me. May I ask about the reason for your visit? Would you make me some breakfast if I told you I came here just to taste your food?" Sheer asked with a smile. Mag shook his head with a smile, and replied, "The breakfast service is already over. If you'd like some breakfast, then you'll have to come back earlier tomorrow. Then let's cut straight to the chase. Regarding the business proposal that you raised before you set off for Rodu, I've already drafted a specific three-way contract. At the same time, Buffett Banks has already established a separate steam operations department, and that department will be solely responsible for everything surrounding the steam engine and steam train projects. The City Lord's Castle has also established a new secret department to correspond with our steam operations department. The two departments will cooperate to research and promote the steam-powered projects, and we aim to construct a usable steam train before the end of the year. What we need now is technical support from you, Mr. Mag," Sheer said as she adopted a more serious expression. Mag was slightly surprised by the efficiency of the Buffett Banks and the City Lord's Castle. He hadn't expected them to set up everything and establish a plan so quickly. After a brief pause for thought, Mag nodded, and replied, "I'll provide all of the required designs and blueprints after verifying that there are no issues with the contract, and I'll offer my technical knowledge and skills throughout the entire project." "Good. It's a pleasure to be working with you." Sheer rose to her feet before extending a hand toward Mag. "The pleasure is all mine." Mag also stood up and shook her hand. Their eyes met, and a smile appeared on both of their faces at the same time. It was a fantastic feeling to be working with smart and straightforward people. There was a forest on the Norland continent known as the Norland Eye, and it was widely renowned as the oldest and most beautiful forest on the entire continent. The forest was lush and scenic, and all types of birds were flying between its trees. The elves who embodied grace and beauty resided here, and they befriended the plant life here with their perfect affinity with nature. Those plants could even assist them in battle, and all of the other races were quite stunned by just how closely connected with nature they were. Thus, the Tree of Life became the sacred tree of the elven race, and it symbolized the harmonious relationship between nature and the elven race. However, many of the massive ancient trees had since been felled for wood, and all of the small wooden huts and tree houses in the forest had disappeared. A series of tall spires and majestic palaces took their place, and the stumps of all of the felled trees told a story of tragedy and sorrow. However, the elves that were traversing through these lavish palaces seemed to pay no heed to all of this, as if they'd already forgotten the sacrifices their forefathers had made to protect this forest. It had been 3 days since the elven princess had returned to the forest, and the incident that had taken place outside the wind forest that night had not gone unnoticed. The forest was currently rather peaceful, but it was only the calm before the storm. Within a grand palace, there were several elderly elves gathered together. If any other elves were present, they'd be stunned to find that the leaders of most of the prominent elven families had been gathered here. Damn it! How many times has Irina stepped in to foil our plans? She killed Schubert, she changed the slavery laws, and even the slaves outside the forest have been freed. Does she even consider us when she does all these things? Does she think she's the queen already? A portly elf yelled in an enraged voice, and the folds of fat all over his body tremored with his fury. Exactly. Those mercenary teams don't even dare to deliver slaves to our forest anymore. If things continue like this, our supply of slaves will be completely cut off. I was looking forward to a few more young and beautiful female servants to warm my bed during the upcoming winter, a tall and thin elf grumbled in agreement. Many of the elves in the palace wore furious expressions on their faces, and they were all cursing Irina for her heroic deeds. In contrast, the elderly elves sitting in the main seats were quite calm and collected, and they didn't contribute to the verbal denouncement of Irina. Only their tightly furrowed brows suggested that they were not feeling as placid as they looked. That's enough, one of the tall and broad elves said in a stern voice, and the palace gradually fell silent as everyone turned their eyes toward him. What should we do, Master Borg? An elf asked in a quiet voice as he looked at the tall and broad elf with a hint of fear in his eyes. Borg Set was the grand elder of the Set family and the #1 war god of the elven race. During the war among species, he'd led the elven armies to many famous victories, and his influence among the elven race was second only to that of the elven queen. In the hearts of his personal guards, he was even more important than the queen herself, and there were rumors going around that his powers were close to comparable to the elven queen's. There was also a rumor circulating that the elven queen might have sustained severe injuries during the war among species, which was why she was in seclusion for most of the year. In that case, Borg was very likely to currently be the most powerful being of the elven race. Irina had always been seen as the successor to the elven queen, which made sense considering she was the queen's daughter. However, Irina was extremely abrasive and extremely opposed to the new social hierarchy being implemented in the elven race. She had always been trying to overthrow this new social system, and that made all of the elves who were benefiting from this new social model quite anxious. However, it would undoubtedly be the case that Irina possessed insane aptitude, and with the elven queen on her side, no one dared to do anything. 3 years ago, she'd given birth to Alex's child, and this scandal was the catalyst for these elves to come out and try and shake Irina's position. Some elves tried to champion purer candidates as the heir to the elven queen. For example, Helena's faction had been searching for a suitable candidate to replace Irina this entire time. Meanwhile, there was also a small group of more radical elves that pinned their hopes on Borg. Borg was only around 600 years old, so he was only just past the halfway mark of an elf's lengthy 1,000-year-long lifespan. If he could become the Elven King, then no changes had to be made, and they could do whatever they wanted with reckless abandon. The Set family was the most powerful family in the Elven race, and they also received the largest number of slaves per year. Borg was also quite fond of picking his own slaves, and it was said that at least one young female elven slave was killed in the Set family per day. Borg cast his gaze toward the elves before him, and said in a grim voice, "What Irina is doing has already posed a major threat to our way of life and shaken our control over the elven race. If we don't crush her, then more and more incidents of a similar nature will take place. The forest that we fought so hard to protect and the families we worked tirelessly to establish will become a pile of loose sand once again. When that time comes, our families will be plunged into eternal torment and pain again." The atmosphere in the palace gradually grew graver and tenser, and all of the elves had fury burning in their eyes. "We must protect the new social hierarchy with our lives," an elf urged through gritted teeth. "Irina is a maverick princess. She gave birth to a human's child, and she slew the mercenary squads that we hired. She released the traitors that we worked so hard to capture, and she poses a major threat to all of our families. That is not something that we can accept, so we must do something about it," Borg said in a cold voice as a frosty look flashed through his eyes. All of the elves were spurred on by his words, and the atmosphere became quite heated. They had envisioned this scenario in their hearts countless times, but Schubert's death was like a bucket of cold water that had abruptly doused the flames in their hearts. However, now that Borg was stepping forward to oppose Irina, the flames in everyone's hearts were reignited. "But we received news from Rodu not long ago stating that Alex is still alive. Not only that, but he slew 6 10th tier powerful beings, including Benson, the leader of the Brewster family," Elliot said in a hesitant voice. His words immediately dampened the fighting spirit of all of the elves present. Many of them were quite fearful of the prospect of crossing the legendary man that was Mag Alex. They did indeed denounce Irina for giving birth to a human's child, but everyone knew that the child's father was someone they couldn't stand against, as he was none other than Mag Alex. 3 years ago, he had been confirmed to be dead, but he had reappeared just 2 days ago before slaying 6 10th tier powerful beings, including the patriarch of the spatial demons, Benson. It was nothing if not an emphatic announcement of his return. Seeing as Alex was alive, and had saved Irina's life 2 days ago, who knew if he would appear in the Wind Forest as well if they were to try and target Irina now? Thus, the entire palace fell silent again as everyone looked to Borg for a decision. 4 years ago, he had once fought Alex to a draw. Alex is not someone who's worthy of fear. Even if he's still alive, that won't affect our plans in any way. Borg looked at everyone with a nonchalant expression, and said, "Back when I fought him 4 years ago, I intentionally held back as I didn't want to embarrass the father of Irina's child. Even if he managed to survive the assassination 3 years ago, he would have definitely sustained severe injuries, so he won't even be as powerful as he once was. Master Borg is the war god of our elven race, while Alex is only a human who's in his 30s, how could he possibly compare with Master Borg? So Master Borg was intentionally holding back. Humph, and to think that Alex was boasting about his own undefeated record for so many years, what a shameless fool." Many of the elves in the palace were reinvigorated upon hearing this, and they all heaped praise on Borg, but there were a few elves who appeared to be rather skeptical. Did Borg really hold back during that battle 4 years ago? I clearly recall that he appeared to be struggling, while Alex looked like he was barely breaking a sweat. Elliot turned to Borg with a bemused look. He was one of the bystanders who had spectated the aforementioned battle, and Alex's immense power had left a strong impression in his mind. In fact, he couldn't even understand why that battle had ended in a draw as opposed to a victory for Alex. The leader of the Baybillas, Vincent, also wore a skeptical look in his eyes, but his expression remained unchanged as he also showered praise on Borg along with all of the other elves. Borg raised a hand to silence everyone, and then said in a solemn voice, "Schubert and Kobold have been killed by Irina for no reason. Even though she's the elven princess, she will be renounced by the goddess of life for taking the lives of her brethren in such a cruel and unwarranted manner. I've decided that during the ceremony to be held in 3 days, I'm going to advise the panel of elders to abolish Irina's position as princess and make her pay the price she should pay for mercilessly slaughtering her brethren. The palace was silent for a moment following this announcement before one of the elves threw his hands up into the air, and yelled, "Abolish Irina! Avenge Schubert and Kobyl! Abolish Irina! I'll be voting to abolish Irina as well!" All of the elves raised their hands up high into the air and yelled in unison with deranged looks in their eyes. If they could abolish Irina as the elven princess, and then disable her as a punishment for killing Schubert and Kobyl, that would spell the end of their days spent in uneasiness and uncertainty. Elliot remained silent throughout this entire process, looking at all of the deranged elves in the palace with a complex look on his face. All of these elves were leaders of prominent families, so their unanimous decision meant that a massive revolution was about to begin in the elven race. He didn't know whether this was a good thing for the elven race, but if Irina were to be abolished as the elven princess, and Borg had no intention of becoming the elven king, then there was a very good chance that Sally would become the new elven princess. That would undoubtedly be vastly beneficial to the Brewster family. However, Elliot certainly wasn't delusional to think that the Brewsters would rise to the top of the Wind Forest because of that. If Borg could disable Irina, who had the support of the Queen and was quite powerful in her own right, then even if Sally were to become the Elven Princess or even the Elven Queen, she would still be nothing more than a puppet controlled by Borg. Furthermore, what made him quite uneasy was the news that he had received earlier this morning. If that piece of news were to be confirmed, then the Brewster family would face a crisis of unprecedented proportions. Vincent glanced at the concerned Elliot, and a complex look also flashed through his eyes. However, he quickly concealed the hint of indecision on his face before joining in on the raucous cries erupting within the palace. "Aside from Irina, I heard that there were 2 other elves who were involved in freeing the elven slaves outside the Wind Forest. If that's true, then they're both traitors of the elven race, and we have to find them and kill them. If they're here in the Wind Forest, then we'll execute them in public to show everyone the price that one will be made to pay for betraying the elven race," Borg announced in a solemn voice. "Burn them to death," all of the elves chanted in unison. A hint of concern flashed through both Elliot's and Vincent's eyes, but they quickly composed themselves again. There weren't all that many elves gathered at the palace, and the meeting didn't last very long. After receiving the support of all of the prominent elven family leaders, the meeting concluded, and all of the elves left through the back door in order not to attract any attention. Borg emerged from the palace, and strode through a long corridor on the way to his backyard. Boris Set rushed over to him with an excited expression, and asked, "Father, did you really hold back during that battle 4 years ago, yet still fight Alex to a draw? Does that mean you're already more powerful than the Elven Queen? Does that mean you're the most powerful being on the entire continent?" As the leader of the Set family, Boris had always been a calm and steadfast figure. However, he was completely unable to maintain his composure on the eve of what was surely going to be a massive revolution in the Elven race. If Irina were to be abolished as the Elven princess, then the Elven race would lose its heir to the throne. If Boris were already more powerful than the Queen, and received widespread support from most of the major families, then he could quite possibly become the first Elven king in history. As Borg's eldest son, the leader of the Set family, and a 9th-tier magic caster, it was quite possible that Boris could then become the second Elven king in history. "I once fought Alex, and I stood no chance in that battle," Boris said in a cold voice without even turning his head. Boris's footsteps immediately faltered, and the excited smile on his face also instantly congealed. Borg was no match for Benson, yet Benson had just been slain by Alex 2 days ago in Rodu, along with 5 other 10th-tier powerful beings. Boris was immediately struck by a bone-chilling sense of fear, and the glorious future that he'd envisioned was completely shattered. Borg had lied to all of the elves. During his battle with Alex, it was most likely the case that Alex had been the one to hold back, yet the battle had still only ended in a draw. Following a brief moment of stunned inactivity, Boris finally came to his senses before rushing over to Borg. He wore a panicked look on his face as he asked, "Father, what are we going to do if Alex comes to the Elven race when we try to plot against Irina?" Borg suddenly stopped before turning to look into Boris's panicked eyes. Let me ask you this, then. Would you be willing to give up everything you have now and return to the days spent in a cramped little treehouse, where you have to pick wild fruits and hunt for sustenance? Boris immediately faltered upon hearing this. He first looked into Boris's grim eyes, then around at the lavish palace around him, and he shook his head without a second thought. However, a hesitant look then appeared on his face as he began, but a cold smile appeared on Borg's face as he cut off Boris. Irina wants to abolish the entire social hierarchy that we've established, yet everything you are able to enjoy now is a direct result of this social hierarchy. If we don't get rid of her, then the next one to be killed could be you, and you'll never be able to climb to the top. I was no match for Alex 4 years ago, but, Boris extended his right hand, and a ball of grey flames erupted from the center of his palm. The flames were emanating a horrifying, bone-chilling aura of death. Next time, I'll make sure he dies. After emerging from the Set family's territory, Elliot walked along the path with a heavy heart. A deer-drawn carriage had already been prepared by his servants, but he wanted to walk while he contemplated some matters. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded behind him. "Please wait, family leader Elliot." A hint of surprise flashed through Elliot's eyes, but he still stopped in his tracks as he put away his dejected expression. He forced a smile onto his face as he turned around to find Vincent making his way toward him. "Hello, family leader Vincent. I didn't get a chance to greet you during the meeting. What a coincidence that we've bumped into each other here." "It's not a coincidence, I came here to seek you out, family leader Elliot," Vincent replied with a shake of his head. "Oh? What business do you have with me, family leader Vincent?" Elliot asked with a surprised expression. Due to the marriage agreement between Sally and Blower, the relationship between the Brewster family and the Baybilly family had become a little awkward. Elliot was unable to dissuade the elders of the family from establishing this marriage agreement for the sake of the Brewster family. However, not long after that, Helena suggested to the Queen to make Sally one of the candidates to become the Elven Princess, and she was also the likeliest candidate to fill the role among all of the chosen ones. As such, the Brewster family's status immediately enjoyed a meteoric rise, making it a family that was comparable to the Baybilly family. If Sally were to become the Elven Princess or even the Elven Queen someday, then the status of the Brewster family would continue to rise, cementing them as the #1 family of the Elven race. Sally had already run away from home as she vehemently opposed this arranged marriage, and the Brewster family still had yet to track her down. Due to the fact that she'd become the likeliest candidate to become the Elven Princess, the elders were no longer forcing her to marry Blower. Instead, they simply wanted to find her and get her to return to the family. Elliot was naturally very loving and protective toward his only daughter, so he naturally couldn't bear to see her marry someone she didn't love. As such, he had wanted to revoke this marriage agreement long ago, but doing so would inevitably create bad blood between the two families, so he didn't know how to raise the issue with the Baybilly family. Even during the meeting earlier, he had been intentionally avoiding Vincent, but who would have thought that Vincent would come to him? Just as Elliot was contemplating how to bring up the matter, Vincent glanced around at their surroundings before taking a step toward him, and then asking in a low voice, among the 2 elves that ambushed the mercenary squad outside the Wind Forest, one of them was young Mistress Sally, right? Wah! A stunned look appeared on Elliot's face, but he quickly recomposed himself before giving a dry chuckle. "Surely you jest, family leader Vincent. My daughter has gone to visit her aunt outside the forest recently. Besides, she's always been quite an obedient girl, so there's no way she'd do something like that. This is one of the arrows that we found at the scene, I'm sure you'll be quite familiar with it, family leader Elliot," Vincent said as he pulled a section of an arrow out of his sleeve before offering it to Elliot. There was an elegant Lee character engraved on the black metal arrowhead one. Elliot looked at the arrow in Vincent's hand, and his expression abruptly changed drastically. This morning, he had received an arrow with the same character engraved onto its head. He had commissioned a craftsman to craft this batch of custom-made arrows for Sally, and all of them had the same character engraved on them. They were also a unique batch of arrows in the wind forest. All of a sudden, a ball of red flames erupted from Vincent's palm, and the arrowhead was melted into a tiny puddle of molten metal that dripped onto the ground amid a faint sizzling sound. Elliot was quite taken aback by this development. He had thought that Vincent would use the arrow to blackmail him into supporting Sally's marriage with Blower, or perhaps extort him for even more than that, but who would have thought that Vincent would destroy the arrow right in front of his eyes? A hesitant look appeared on Elliot's face as he asked, "What are your intentions, family leader Vincent?" Vincent waved a hand toward a deer-drawn carriage parked beside them, and he wore a grim look on his face as he said, "Please come with me, family leader Vincent. There are some matters that I must speak with you about in private." Elliot hesitated momentarily, but still nodded and got onto the carriage in the end. Half an hour later, within a quiet and closed-off room, Elliot stared at Vincent with an incredulous look as he exclaimed, "You're telling me that Sally is in Chaos City, and that the two elves who ambushed the mercenary squad 2 days ago were none other than her and Blower?" "That's right. I've received reliable information from Ing over at Chaos City that Blower and young Mistress Sally had taken these elves to Chaos City. There, they were granted residence by the city lord's castle, and an announcement was made, stating that these elves would be protected by the city." Vincent wore a complex expression as he said, "I only wanted Blower to go out and see the world, but I didn't think that he'd get into so much trouble. Now, our two families are basically in the same boat. If Borg were to hear about this, both of our families would most likely be destroyed. You sent him out to see the world? You must have known that Sally was in Chaos City well in advance, right, family leader Vincent?" A wry smile appeared on Elliot's face. An apologetic look appeared in Vincent's eyes as he replied, "Rest assured, family leader Elliot. I won't force a marriage between Blower and young Mistress Sally, but this news will spread sooner or later." Even though they were never seen with the rescued elves, nor did they reveal their identities to those elves, there's always an avenue through which news like this can escape. Elliot took a moment to compose himself before asking, "What do you suggest?" A dark expression appeared on Vincent's face as he said, "That Borg is an extremely ambitious man who's aiming to overthrow Her Majesty and replace her as the monarch of the elven race. If he really does become the Elven King, and then decide to turn on us, then both our families will be in dire straits. If he really is already more powerful than Alex, then no one will be able to stop him from disabling Irina. When that time comes, whether Her Majesty and Mistress Helena can control the situation will determine the state of the elven race. As such, we should. I really am okay, Princess, it's just a little bump, and you already treated it for me. Let me go and cook for you. The sun is so bright today, and the tree of life is also really happy. Let's not go the starry sky cave." Within a spacious cave, Fira's face was quite pale as she carefully tugged on the hem of Irina's clothes with a beseeching look on her face. "No one can touch you as long as I'm still alive." Irina looked at the deathly pale Firas, and thought back to when she'd returned to her cave 2 days ago. Back then, Firas had been lying in a pool of her own blood, and if she'd returned any later than she did, Firas would have died from excessive blood loss. That was not some small bump, it was a lethal hole in her chest. "Firas, you belong to me, and I'll kill anyone who dares to touch you." Irina pinched Firas' cheek in a playful manner before exiting the cave with purpose and killing intent radiating from her body. The name Sally in Chinese is spelled Shali, the Li character is essentially the second half of her name, an initial of sorts.